You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Okay, then, we will call this meeting of the Branford Planning and Zoning Commission to order. It is Thursday, May 16th. I have 7:03 p.m. I'll introduce members of the commission and staff. Joe Chadwick, commission member, are you here?
Joe Chadwick is present.
Commission member Fred Russo. Fred, are you here?
Fred Russo is here.
And I believe Joe Biuzzo is not here, so I won't ask his name. Marcy Pelusi, commission member, are you here, Marcy?
Marcy's here.
Massimo Liguri. Are you here, Massimo, commission member?
Massimo Liguri is here.
And Sharon Hutner. Sharon, are you here?
Sharon Hutner is here.
Thank you, Sharon. Our staff this evening is our town planner, Harry Smith. Harry, are you here?
I am here.
And our assistant planner, Evan Brining. Evan, are you here?
Here.
And our clerk recording secretary in the background is Michelle Martin. I am Chuck Anders, chair. And at this point, I'll ask Fred to read the notice of public hearing.
Yeah, I have actually two forms of the legal notice. The first one is legal notice, Town of Branford. The Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Branford, Connecticut hereby gives notice of public hearings to be held on Thursday, May 16th, 2024 at 7 p.m. by remote technology. Consider the applications listed below. Information regarding how to participate in the public hearings will be provided on the Commission's meeting agenda that will be posted on the town's website at least 24 hours prior to the meeting. Application 24-3.3 Zoning Regulation Amendment removes Section 7.19B, number 6, to delete the 20 event limit by Attorney James J. Perito, care of Nuzzle Properties, LLC, the applicant. This foregoing legal notice was published once in the Sound on May 9th, 2024, and also May 3rd in the Register. The remaining legal notices are as follows. Application 24-4.3, special exception in coastal site plan for a single family within 100 feet of a coastal resource and grading, section 6.8, located at 32 Wood Road, Sue and Stephen Lundy, applicants and owner. Application number 24-4.4, special exception for an accessory apartment located at 16 Well Sweep Road, Lisa Vita Williams, applicant and owner. Application number 24-4.8, special exception for an accessory apartment located at 35 East Main Street, Paula Murphy, applicant and owner. Application 24-4.5, special exception modification in coastal site plan for multifamily residential 4 units located at 4-3 Elm Road, 4-3 Elms LLC, applicant and owner. Application 24-4.6, special exception for an oversized accessory structure garage over 15 feet in height located at 4-3 Elm Road, 4-3 Elm Road LLC, applicant and owner. And application 24-4.7, special exception modification for grading, section 6.8, located at 4-3 Elms Road, 4-3 Elms LLC, applicant and owner. All said hearings, at said hearings, all persons will have the right to be heard. Copies are on file in the Planning and Zoning Commission's office at the Planning and Zoning Department, 1019 Main Street, Branford, Connecticut, 06405. Written communications may be sent to the above address or to Planning and Zoning at branford-ct.gov. Branford Planning and Zoning Commission, C. Andres, chairperson.
Chuck Anders, chair. Thank you, Fred.
Okay.
We will follow our normal format for public hearings, which is the applicant goes first, makes its presentation. After the applicant and its consultants comment, we turn it over to the commission staff. We typically hear a summary of a staff report to give an overview, and we open up for questions and comments from commission members. At that point, we'll open it up for public participation. I'll ask Evan to review with everyone the process for doing that. We ask that you state your name and address for the record, make your comments, and then we allow the applicant to respond to the public comments, and there may be additional questions and comments from the commission. We may or may not conclude the public hearing. It's not unusual to have a public hearing extend over multiple meetings. So with that, I will ask Evan to review the process for the public to participate and actually applicants to participate in this Zoom meeting process.
Sure. So when prompted, if you'd like to participate or make any comments, your computer has a microphone for two-way communication. Down at the bottom of your window, there's a raise hand button. You can also type into the chat that you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. If you're dialing in, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And we ask that everyone please state their name at the beginning of their comment or question.
Chuck Anderstair, thank you, Evan. So we'll follow our agenda items. So our first public hearing item is Nuzzo Properties LLC, care of James Ferrito, Esquire. It's a zoning regulation amendment to remove Section 6.19.B6 to delete the 20 event limit for non-agricultural farm events as accessory uses in industrial zone. Is the applicant ready to proceed with that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. For the record, James Perito. I'm an attorney at Halloran and Sage. Office is at 265 Church Street in New Haven, and I have an address here in Branford of 55 Averill Place. This application is on behalf of my client, Nuzzo Properties LLC. I also represent Audra and Anthony Nuzzo, who operate the Nuzzo Farm at East Main Street. So, as you've stated, we've applied to remove the 20 non-farm event limit that's in 719B6 of the regulations. I think a bit of history might be helpful to the commissioners and the public. If you recall, about 5 years ago, 719 was enacted to allow for non-agricultural farm events as an accessory to farming. If you look at the regulation, the purpose, it says pretty clearly that in keeping with our 2019 Plan of Conservation and Development, non-agricultural farm events will allow farms to develop alternative sources of revenue to increase their economic viability and thereby help to preserve the rural character of Branford, preserve farmland, preserve green space, protect natural resources, prevent overcrowding, provide unique venues for events, preserve wildlife habitats and tracts of open space, and provide local farm products and preserve the agricultural history of the town. I think that's important to keep in mind as what was the purpose of that regulation. The non-agricultural farm events, and this is part of our regulations, present unique opportunities to combine aspects of business, tourism, and agriculture, and now we consider that agritourism, to provide a number of financial, educational, and social benefits to the community while allowing farmers to supplement their farming activities with activities and events indirectly related to the farmland, and farming. While this regulation would apply to all people applying throughout the town, I think it's helpful to look at the experience that my clients have had. When they came in January of 2020, they applied for the special exception to allow for the non-farming events on their location in East Main Street, and that was granted. And then literally a month or two later, COVID hit, and so everything was shut down. Over time, people started to gather and would gather at places like the Nuzzo Farm because you could be outside more often than on other kind of venues. And so they saw over time that this event activity started to increase. Over the past 4+ years, we've seen an evolution of both the farm activities and the events. And so farm and non-farm events, the distinction is often not clear. And the reason why we're applying for this request to remove the 20 limit is that we want to make sure that we're always in compliance with the regulations of the town. And often a farm event or non-farm event, there's sort of a blurriness to sometimes when this goes on, and we don't want to run afoul with the enforcement officer or the regulation itself. So people clearly come for farm events that we have out there, but also when they're there, for instance, they come out for a child's birthday party. because there's the animals and they're petting the animals, and it's sort of, like a petting zoo kind of situation. Maybe they're coming in the fall because the apples, they're doing something with the apples and having a party that's related to that. But it's sort of like there's like this synergy between the farm events, the farm, and the non-farm events. And for instance, someone might come for the birthday party with the kids with the petting of the animals, and they'll see the lavender in the fields, or they'll see the beehives that are there, and they'll say, "Gee, this might be a fun place to have a bee honey themed baby shower." People think of all kinds of these things. That in turn prompts the farm aspects to maybe expand the beekeeping, maybe expand the lavender fields. So again, it's sort of like this hand in hand that happens and evolves over time. And the 20 limit is sort of an artificial number. It doesn't really serve any purpose. Some of the towns around us that have similar regulations don't have a limitation on the number of non-farm events. Now, I understand that the initial concern is, well, is it an accessory, or is it, the full-time event space? Well, it's clearly not the full-time event space. I mean, it's an active farm. There's lots of different aspects to the farming that goes on. So it remains an accessory. And I can't think of a lot of examples where we put like a number on an accessory use that sort of sets how that definition is. It's sort of unique in that way. And I don't really think it's appropriate and needed in this instance. And my discussions with the town planner, one of the concerns that he thought that you all might have and that he had was that when the frequency of the events increase in the summer, how will that impact the overflow parking in grassy areas? That's a legitimate concern. We can see, like on the town green, when we have many events in the summer and they're more frequent now, if it's a hot summer and a dry summer, the grass gets beat up. We can see that. What I found in my discussions with the Nuzzos is that it is actually quite rare for the parking to be on any of the lawn areas and the reserve parking. The vast majority of parking is always on the gravel lots. And that's for a couple of reasons. One is we don't have the kind of number of cars coming in that you typically might see. We often have people Ubering in. We have often a lot of buses that come in to drop people off. They just had an event, about 80 or so people. They all came, for the most part, they all came on a bus. And if you look at the actual, in our case, the special permit that was granted for the Nuzzo Farm, specifically in the conditions of approval, it sets out certain conditions that address those concerns. For instance, under number 6 and number 7 of the approvals, it talks about that the use is continued on the continued viability and maintenance of the grass or turf areas, which the non-agricultural farm events take place on. That's actually where you have an event on the grass. Should the annual inspection reveal, this is number 7, reveal concerns with the viability of the grass surfaces of the overflow parking spaces, the owner of the property shall propose for approval as part of their annual event operating plan measures to repair the grass surface. Or if it's determined by you as the commission that it has to be gravelled, then it has to be gravelled. So you have these checks. Number 10 is another one that talks about landscaping. Landscaping has to be kept up through the life of the special exception. If one of the landscaping items dies or is damaged, it's supposed to be replaced. So I think that, in the context of your special exception and the conditions you're able to put on, that applications coming in the future, applications to change existing ones coming in, there's plenty of opportunities for this commission to ensure that the land itself is not overburdened, that the parking isn't issues, that the lighting is appropriate, and that it's in keeping with what's going on with that particular farm. So we would ask that that section be removed as just as a point of the kind of events that we have. About half of the events, less than 50 people. The other half is between 50 and 170. The building has a fire code capacity of 200. That's not often that we have that. But it does happen. And people enjoy being there. It's an alternative for many people that aren't able to afford, frankly, the more traditional wedding venues, as an example, or other places. So we're happy to answer any questions about that, but we think that From our experience, at least over the past 4 years, there has been no issues. There's been no reports of any issues to the police department or the fire department or the health department. So we would ask that you consider removing the limitation on the farm event. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chuck Anderson, yeah, thank you, Mr. Perito. Maybe what we'll do is we'll ask Harry to summarize his staff report, and we'll open up for questions from commission members. So, Harry, you want to start with that?
Sure, Harry Smith, Town Planner. I think Attorney Perito gave a pretty succinct and comprehensive review of what's in front of you. We'd like to elaborate a little bit on a couple things. One being the history of this. Back in 2019, there was a public hearing, actually probably extended sessions of public hearings on what was the second of two applications. So there was a lot of debate and discussion about how to work this out. I think the Nuzzos came to staff here with a pretty generic proposal. After some discussion, they engaged the services of an attorney, and staff spent a lot of time working with that particular attorney on coming up with the current regulation, which I think to date has seems to have served the facility well. I'm happy it's been successful. I think it's a nice addition to the town. Just in terms of the limit itself, this goes back to, I think there was sort of an informal, with a zoning officer, consideration of 4 events on a farm as being clearly accessory. That was felt to be too limiting, I think, by the Nuzzos when they started doing events out there. Staff here was concerned that the events were could be better organized in terms of where people parked, how they were set up, and so forth. So there was a lot of discussion about that. And there were various numbers looked at as a way to clearly create some kind of bright line between what's accessory use and what's a full-scale event use of property. The 20 number came from just looking at the calendar, trying to figure out if you had one event on each of the warm weather weekends, what would that number come out to be? And the applicants and their attorney went back and forth, and they proposed 20, which I think helped create a clearer box. I appreciate what Attorney Perito was saying about, well, the events are different kinds of events. They're different sizes. Some of them incorporate farm activities, and that, is great because I think that's something they envision for the property to have. It's my understanding, and I'm glad it's worked out that way. I still am concerned about, without a limit at all, how it ends up staying accessory per se. And I'm really unclear, I guess, what the applicant's looking for. They're looking for more small events. They're looking for more large events. And whether there's something to be worked out in terms of bumping up the number to a higher number that is just something as a benchmark. I mean, there is a requirement on the approval to the applicant to file a list of events they're planning for the current year under the non-agricultural farm events, not the agricultural type activities where kids come in and, betting, whatever they do out there. So we haven't got that one this year, but we have got in past years. And it's a way for everyone to know what's going on, because that was, I think, one of the concerns raised early on in the process as well. So again, just to go back a little, I mean, I think this was touched on by Attorney Perito, but the desire was to create an event venue, but integrate it with the farm and not have it be something like Bill Mills Castle or Woodwinds. And I think the applicant at that time also did not want to put the investment in the property to create a paved parking and formalized lighting and a more commercial look, which they didn't want because that would interfere with having it be a farm. So that all, I think, got worked out fairly successfully. I understand the evolutionary aspects of what's going on out there, but I don't know quite how to create some guardrails around the use of the property for events that still keeps it accessory to the farm. So maybe Attorney Perito can come up with something that will help the situation or help address those comments. Maybe the commission feels it's clear enough already. I'll leave that to you folks. As an aside, I will just, in addition to the grass parking area comments to date, I just throw out there that, I've had conversations with the recreation director, Alex Paluzzi, in the past about the use of Slaney Field and how people park on the grass and what a problem that can be given a certain level of usage, which is at some points in the season, several days a week at least. And particularly if you throw in a rain event and all of a sudden you're really disturbing a grass surface to the point where it's really problematic. So I understand there's not a lot of use of that out there. Getting a better grip on that might create a better comfort level too, at least as far as I'm concerned. Because the way it's set up now, and this is a property specific comment, but there's only one property that's ever been approved for this use. That's the Nuzzo's farm. There are, I understand, 74 gravel spaces on the property and 47 sort of overflow grass spaces. 24 of the gravel spaces were intended for use to support the building for smaller events. And the remaining 50 of the gravel spaces plus the 47 overflow were for larger events that utilize some of the outside and so forth, just had more people. Getting a handle on how many people come by bus. I mean, it's hard to micro this to the point where, but I think that might be helpful to frankly create some kind of provision where, okay, maybe the event limit gets modified, or even if you take it out, then there is at least a requirement to revisit the special exception and site plan approval to go through some of the specifics related to the property and how events being held, who's coming, how much of the site is used for parking, is the grass being used, how often, just to get everybody a comfort level. And whether the commission establishes some limits to the special exception process rather than a regulatory process is something else to consider. I will say also we did get two comments back from the two statutorily required referrals, one to DEP. They did not have any concerns and found it in conformance with this is actually part of the industrial zone is in the coastal review area, so that's why it was referred to DEP, even though this property is not. That's the only approval for it. The referral to the Regional Planning Commission, SCROG, they came back with a comment. I don't know what their concern was, stating the proposal may generate negative intermissible impact to the towns in the Regional Planning Commission region, as well as habitat or ecosystems along Island Sound. So I will try and get in touch with staff at the Regional Planning Commission to find out why that referral comment was made. I've also just to touch base with the police chief about, I have not heard any complaints out there, but just to double check if they have any complaints about what's happening on the site. I've not heard anything personally. We've had no complaints here. So that's all I've got at the moment. And I'll stop there, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Great. Chuck Anderson, thanks. Thanks, Harry. Before I ask commission members for a question, Mr. Perito, did you want to respond to any of Mr. Smith's comments at this time, or wait? Or
Jim Perito again for the applicant. Mr. Chair, if we can wait until if the commissioners have any questions, I could respond to all that. Sort of.
Sure.
Fine. Thanks.
Absolutely. Are there questions, comments from commission members?
Chuck, Fred Russo.
Fred.
I think Attorney Perito made some very, very good points about the farm. That, it started out as a farm. They have as a accessory business to it, the venue end of it. And I think what we have is really a work in progress. I don't know if the Nuzzos or Attorney Perito can predict where it's all going to go. It seems to me that I'm glad for them. The fact that there's been no complaints for the way it's been set up. Maybe that's because there is a fence around what they're allowed to do. But I think the positive spin that I see with all all of this is that there hasn't been any problems. You know, maybe there will be neighbors here tonight that will come in and say, "Oh, it's been crazy there." We'll wait and see if that's the case. But from at least what I get from this is that what the farm is now become kind of a work in progress. There's really no way of knowing whether the rental business is going to get bigger than the farm in a sense in terms of dollars. I mean, the last thing I want to do is start monitoring what they do for business. That's not my point. But I think that I can understand what Attorney Perito is saying. I think he's probably right. It's probably very difficult to separate what part of the farm and what's part of the regular business. And so on that basis, and I think Harry made some very legitimate points too. You know, I really feel torn both ways. I think both sides are saying very, very good stuff, very positive stuff. And so I would think, and you know, I'll wait for Mr. Perito to say what he has to say as well. But you know, if we started out with a limit of 20 events, maybe there's a way to increase the number of events that are more realistic for what they do. They would know the Nuzzles would know better how many events they've done. And I'd like to see maybe something like that expand that way, without having a blanket thing to say, hey, whatever you want to do, you do. Because at some point in time, if that part of the business gets bigger, and I hope it does for them actually, then there's a different set of regulations that will affect like lighting and parking and stuff like that. Whereas right now it's really not their main line of business, but it may at some point in time exceed what they do with the farm. So I think both Harry and Attorney Perito made some very, very valid points. Kind of torn actually between, you know, I think they both had something very valuable to say. And so my end is I'm saying to myself, well, you know, I think that we should expand it in some way. Maybe we should just say, hey, you know, instead of 20 events, it should be 30 events or 40 events or one event a week. Some other way to watch it and monitor it, because that's what we've kind of done in the last couple of years. We've monitored what they've done. Seems like they've done okay. You know, I don't know what volume of business that represents, but it seems like it's at least enough to want to come back and say, hey, we're doing enough, so we'd like to expand our use of the farm. And so, and I don't really have an objection with that either. I don't know about what Scroggs said about, you know, affecting the environment or not, but I think things like the grass and stuff that are concerns. And so what I would think is maybe is to keep what we have and expand it more so that they're allowed to have more events where they're not getting, you know, maybe there's a magic number out there. Maybe it's 30 or 40 or 50. I don't know. But some magic number so that they're not going to be in violation of the regulations, which I appreciate them taking that into consideration. But it's not being so restricted that every time they have an event, they have to worry, is this number 21 or is it 23? So that would be my point. I think that I could vote against what they want to do. I would also caution myself to say maybe there still needs to be some limits. Again, not to be punitive against them, but just to say keeps it away for us to monitor. Because as Harry said, there are no other farms that this is being done at, not in Branford at least. So, you know, this is our test run too as a commission, how we handle it. And, you know, so we don't want to set the wrong precedent and go overboard either. So, but I can understand why they want to do more. And I think it's a great venue because we don't have any of those in town. So it gives our town a little distinction and where someone can come in and have an event where you can have a birthday party and pet animals. You're going to see that very often. So, and the events could be very small where they don't really create a lot of traffic. I think if they were having major weddings like Bill Miller, that's a different story. I'm not sure that's where they're at this point, and they may be at that point sometime in the future. If they are, then at that point we need to do something different. But I think at this stage of the game, from at least what I've heard, I don't think the events that they're having really meet the criteria of Bill Miller's. So that's it. I don't know where I'm at really, but that's what's in my mind.
Chuck Anderson, thank you, Fred. Other questions, comments from commission members?
Joe Chadwick speaking. If this was a farm and they were, say, making firewood, and at some point making firewood brought in a little sawmill, and they started making pallets. At the end of the day, it wouldn't even be here. We wouldn't even be discussing it. Somehow, this entertainment venue has acquired some kind of life, and my feeling is if it hasn't caused a disturbance, we should just not have a limitation on it. The accounting and the staff time involved in maintaining the accounting is just the effort to effect ratio just doesn't seem to be worth it. To Harry's point, if some improvement needs to be made on the farm in order to support this, then that should come in as a special exception for consideration, because at that point, if it's expanding into a very specialized facility or something terribly out of character with a farm use, then we can start to respond, and then we can maybe reel it in or shape it a little more to a farm concept. But at this point, I don't see a reason to regulate the number of events per year or attempt to characterize them, or it just doesn't seem worth it. It seems to be a viable thing, and we should just support it.
Chuck Anderson, thank you, Joe. Other questions, comments from commission members?
Yeah, Massimo Ligori.
Massimo?
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with Joe Chadwick. Putting limitations on the amount of events to preserve this farm, and 20 might have sounded good a few years back. Expenses went up tremendously. Farmers are not having the easiest time in today's day and age. I'd love to see this farm be preserved. I don't think we should put limits on how many events, because then we're putting the limits on how much money that he can make to keep this farm preserved. I think that look, there maybe should be some restrictions, like, hey, if you're going to have a wedding of 500 people, where we're going to be able to park them, things like that. And I think that, just keeping the responsibility on what he has right now, the amount of people that the farm and the parking, including the grass, may be maintained properly after the events. Maybe give it a check-in once in a while. I'm not sure how we can work that as a commission, to put rules and regulations in place for that, but I'm sure we could come up with something if need be. But I think he should, I hate putting restrictions on businesses, to help, that restrict the amount of money they could make. Like, if you could have 20 parties, why can't you have 40? Why can't you have 60? What is going to be the difference if you have it on a Friday and a Saturday, every weekend? They're probably not going to have many events during the winter. I mean, it's an outside facility. I think it's and it's becoming more popular. And with the younger generation, they want to definitely do more. My daughter, for instance, she wanted to have a baby shower at a farm. We decided against it. We're not having it at a farm, but that was something that she was really into. She thinks it's beautiful with all the flowers and the animals, and the younger generation is really up on this, and I think the town of Branford needs it. And I hate to put those kinds of restrictions on a business. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Chuck Anderson, thank you, Massimo. Other questions, comments from commission members?
Yep.
Sharon
Hutner here. I think that anything that we can do to promote open space in Branford is a good thing. And I think the Nuzzo Farm represents that. And from what's been reported, they've been very responsible in the past about having these events and knowing what they can accommodate and what they can't accommodate. But I have to appreciate what Harry said in terms of having some kind of limitation or some kind of number that we can use to control things if we need to. I would think that we could sit down with the lawyer and the family and our planning and zoning people and come up with a compromise number that they would feel comfortable with. I would think that that would be a useful discussion.
Chuck Anderson, thank you, Sharon. Anyone else? Marcy, did you have any comments?
Sure. I think they don't have any large buildings on the site that's going to start to drive large event numbers. And to me, that's a self-controlling mechanism. If they were to come in and propose a major new building to have weddings that was inside, to deal with inclement weather, then of course, all the appropriate controls and issues would be triggered. But it's mostly outdoor events. I don't know that there's been any impact over time. Even back then, I didn't quite fully understand the legality of why we were regulating numbers of events, as a solution. I haven't heard it in any of the other years we've done anything else. And to me, we shouldn't be having that kind of control over their business. I think the property itself and the buildings and configuration create its own, threshold of use, and I don't see it as being all that different than Rose Hill Orchards or Bishops or things in neighboring towns that have functioned very well and don't drive a lot of demand of cars and parking. Or even the Onigo in town is very informal, and that I think has a lot more traffic concerns than what we see up here. So it just seems inconsistent to me trying to regulate the events. And maybe I'm missing something legally, but I'm just intuitively looking at the way the land is and building are with what the uses are, and it seems to be perfectly compatible and has been functioning very well. So
Chuck Ennis here. Thank you, Marcy. I have a few comments and questions. One was on the Scrog report. I was there. I'm the representative from our town. I abstained from voting, but I understood what the issue was. The potential intermunicipal impact that staff was looking at was noise. In other words, this allows outdoor events, and if it could affect a neighboring town, there is the potential. They didn't say there would, because again, you're just looking at a text amendment, and it's kind of problematic to figure out intermunicipal impacts of a text amendment without a specific project in front of you. Nonetheless, that's what Scrog is, authorized to do. And that was the thought, that there could be a potential intermunicipal impact for outdoor events on noise. And this was one of the issues, I believe, that was brought up initially, because before this was approved, back when there were 4 events a year, there was some concern, I think, in North Branford, actually, about noisy events. But my understanding is that those were, I think there may have been limits on hours of operation and outdoor music, and I don't understand there have been complaints about that. But that was the reason behind that. So that's comment number one. Number two is question. How many events have there been? I think one of the conditions of approval, Harry mentioned, and maybe Mr. Perito mentioned, is that the applicant is to file the limit, so we have a sense of what's going on, a schedule. I'm assuming that you've getting near 20 or close to 20 in years past. I know you haven't done one for this year, but do you know what it's been?
Mr. Chair, would you like me to respond now?
Yes, I would love to.
First, I'll be happy to answer that. So first of all, with the Scrog comment on noise, I mean, both Branford and North Branford Guilford all have noise ordinances. And again, there's been no complaints that we know of from any of those towns, the people around there. I was involved with the facility at Van Willigens, the pond project that was out there, and noise was a big issue over there. And there was a whole series of tests done that really showed that in reality it was not going to be an issue, and it was not going to be any violations of the noise ordinance in that case for North Branford. Part of that property is in Branford, but not where their venue area is. The best way to characterize the non-farm events is we're at the 20 mark. Okay. We've had upwards of 60 events some are farm events, some are in that blurry line there, some are small, some are under 50. I said, I think before, of the 60 or so events in the past, half of those are under 50 people that we've had there. There's been a handful over that are in a range between 50 and maybe 170 or so. It sort of varies. We had a remembrance of life for a person that had passed away, and over the course of the day, there were more people coming in and out because it was sort of an a special thing. There was never maybe more than maybe 80 people on site, but there was people coming, paying their respects, and then leaving. So that was sort of a fluid event that was there. We have not filed our report for this year, in part because we have staffing issues. One of the things that I think Mr. Chadwick mentioned was, there's a lot to keep track of. There's a lot to do, and we lost a staff member, so that's one of the reasons why that hasn't come in yet. To sort of address some of the other concerns the commission mentions, I mean, maybe the solution is to keep the hearing open until next month, and Harry and I and the applicant can sit down and throw some points around and see if we can address that. I know that the parking issue and the lawn issue is a valid concern. And I think the existing special exception has conditions on it. Maybe there's a way we can, within the context of that, lend some comfort to the commission. So be happy to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Perito. And that was sort of one of my next questions, is because when you were describing the existing special permit, it seemed to me you were suggesting that under the existing special permit, we would have authority to require, for example, if you're having a lot of events, if there's mud and there's stormwater problems, that we would have authority under the existing special permit to require gravel parking or something like that. I don't know if that's accurate or if I'm properly characterizing what you said.
No, again, Jim Perito, I think, Mr. Chair, that's correct. I mean, the existing special permit has specific conditions that live through the life of the special exception. That we'd have to report. There could be if there was an inspection by the zoning enforcement officer saying, this parking area, the grass area is in bad shape, something needs to be done, and then maybe they make a recommendation both to the applicant and to the commission that we have to come in to make a change to make it gravelled at that point. There are means within the existing special exception that I think give the commission and staff the tools to keep an eye on that, frankly.
Yeah, and that was, I didn't know also a question about the existing special exception, that if we adopted this text change or some modification of this text change, would the applicant need to revise the special exception? Does it have the 20 in there, or would you contemplate any additional amendment, or would that be it? You would just move forward under the existing special exception, or there'd be some additional review process. I don't know, but and I don't know what you were thinking of that.
I again, Jim Perito, for the applicant, I think that I'll go back and check, but I'm pretty sure that the special exception does not specify the events because that's in the ordinance. But right. It's about filing the annual report and plan for the year, where that should be reflected in there. I wouldn't think that the special exception would have to come back in for a modification. If there's a concern after looking at that about how you deal with if there are issues, again, I think the special exception has it in there. If the commission were to say, we'll eliminate the 20, or if the commission says, we'll up it to a different number, I think it doesn't really change the special exception. I think we've looked at that rubric already.
The final comment I had was that I mean, there's sort of two issues raised by staff. One is the sort of the details on the parking, the sort of the limited number because of the, the gravel, non-gravel. We've mentioned that. But the other one was the accessory, the nature of this. And that's a reason for having a smaller number, which I think the applicant had suggested at that time. And I understand that too, because when you look at the definition, these are described as accessory uses of a farm incidental to the primary farming operation. And so that's sort of built into the definition. That said, I think you can make an argument that, hey, just on a quantity basis, we have to farm, we have to feed the chicken, we have to feed the animals, we have to tend to the Christmas trees or whatever. That's a 365-day operation, so that you can substantially raise the number and still, in good faith, make the argument that it's accessory, even if it's a third of the 365 days, whatever. It could be a fairly high number, and I think still, in my mind, be accessory. Um, uh, are there other questions or comments from commission members or staff? Gary?
Just a couple quick points. I think Attorney Perito's suggestion that the hearing be continued and that there be a meeting with myself and Mr. Perito and the Nuzzos is a great idea. And it would help, I think, me at least, to get a better idea of what they're looking to do, which I think hopefully will lend itself towards coming up with a solution based on all the comments that have been made to date. With respect to possibly changing grass parking to gravel, that does possibly bring up question of stormwater, storm drainage management. My recollection is that because of the limited number of events, there's almost nothing in terms of formal storm drainage provisions on the property. Whether that be affected or not, I don't know. I could talk about that with the town engineer. The other issue might be lighting. I think the provision to light the large area where there's the farm pens. I don't even know if there is any lighting out there at this point. And the field and any kind of events that go past nightfall. So if you're having a large event that potentially move into I don't know what they called the building, I guess the cafe, one of the old applications, but I don't know if that's correct. If you have people parking routinely without any event number limit, do you really need more formal lighting in that parking area for the larger events? Could there be some kind of limit where smaller events, maybe under 50, maybe there's an unlimited number of them because they don't have any real impact on the grass parking area because all the parking would be in the gravel area. I mean, I think there's some ways to work out something somewhere in the middle of all the comments that have been made that addresses what the applicant would like to do if we understood that a little better, I think, at staff level. So.
Chuck Anderson, thank you. Thank you, Harry. Let's open it up to the public and see if there's any public comments. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment? Evan, you want to just review again quickly how the public can participate?
Sure. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a raise hand button. You can also type into the chat that you'd like to participate. Looks like Perry Maresca would like to make a comment.
Hi, Perry Maresca, Branford Economic in Business Development Manager. So I'm a little concerned why we are restricting a business that is trying to grow and improve their business model in a responsible, beneficial way. The fact that they're being limited to only 20 events a year gives me pause. I'm thinking, neighboring towns have farms that have multiple events. Many of them have more than 20 per month. And many of them have additional parking on the grass without required permanent parking or permanent lighting. Our town is a business beach facility that during the prime season has multiple events back to back. We all go there, we all enjoy those events, and we all behave. The abutting town has two farm venues that abut Branford, and they both have multiple events right across the river, right across the border. What the Nuzzo family of Branford is requesting is not unique to the area or the town. I am pleased that Attorney Perito, Mr. Smith, and the Nuzzos are willing to sit down and figure out a mutually satisfactory result for the benefit of all of us in the town and in the region. Earlier this morning, the Connecticut tourism representatives from the state were in Branford and met with a lot of us and some of the tourist attractions in the area. And one of the big pushes and one of the things they're saying is people are coming throughout the state for events and enjoyable things as tourists. And this is something that will bring people in. And when people come to an event, then they say, hey, let's come back here and let's bring the kids and show them the animals and everything. So I do think it's wise. I think it's smart. Channel 8 even was even there at the meeting today and talking about it. And really there's a lot of value in having places for people to come and build the tourism in the area. So please, let's see what we can do to make this work for all. I don't think it's too big an ask, especially as I said, 20 a year is so minimal for a piece of property like that, and in the area that it's in. There's other places that it's much more in a residential area. And if it can survive there, then this certainly can survive up there where there's not a lot of homes. Thank you.
Chuck Kendrick, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Maresca. Are there other members of the public that wish to comment? See anyone, Evan?
Do not see anyone.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Perito, I know that you made the offer to meet with Harry and to continue the public hearing and to discuss a little bit further with Harry. And is that you want to continue with that? Is that how you'd like to pursue, or how would you like to pursue?
I think, Mr. Chair, that would be a good plan. I think the comments are all been very useful, and we'll set up a meeting with Harry and the Nuzzos before the next meeting, and hopefully just at that point report back. Then we could close the hearing and move from there.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Perito. Any other questions, comments from anyone? It looks like we're going to continue this hearing, but just from commission members or staff, any comments? Hearing none, then we will continue this matter to our next meeting, which I believe, is that enough time for you? Our next meeting is June 6th. Mr. Perito, does that work? Oh,
yes, yeah, that works.
Okay. Okay. So we'll continue this item number 1 to our meeting on June 6th. Thank you, Mr. Perito. Thank you, members of the public. That brings us then to item number 2, which is Sue and Stefan Lundy, applicants and owners, 32 Wood Road. This is a special exception in CAM for a single family residence within 100 feet of a coastal resource at 32 Wood Road. And I think we received some comments from the neighbors and from an engineer today. My understanding is that the applicant may want to continue this, but is the applicant here? Would you like to comment on this? Is who's representing the applicant on this one?
I'm sorry, Denise. I don't think we can hear you.
Oh. Like you should be able to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah,
we
we
can.
can hear you.
Okay,
Yes.
great. I had to do it a couple times. So Denise Von Dassel, I'm the architect on this project. I had a meeting this afternoon after having received the correspondence that was submitted this afternoon to the land use department, and in discussions with the Stefan and Sue Lund, the owners, Joe Wren, the project engineer, and the builder, we've requestfully asked that you continue this meeting to the next month, to June 6th, so that we have time to actually dive in and respond to all the issues that were brought up.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. So then we will then applicants request we continue this, so we can continue this to our meeting on June 6th in light of the new information. So if you're here on this item, we are going to be continuing this matter to our public hearing on June 6th. And Harry, perhaps I know we received an engineering report, but it would probably be helpful to provide that to our town engineer too, as well, to get comments from that.
Yeah, we will do that. Thank you.
Great.
This is Sharon Hunter. I have a question. This property is in a private community, and there's no way to get in to take a look at the site. Is there any way that commission members can get in to the private community in order to take a look at the site?
I guess the question would be, is the applicant willing to work with staff if commission members want to contact staff, and if the owner would allow commission members on their own to view the site? I don't think we need all of us have to, if we want to do a site walk, you have to be a meeting when we're in the middle of a public hearing. But if individual members want to go, I think as long as you get the owner's consent and the owner allows for that, I think that's possible. Is that okay? Is the applicant's, is that okay with the owner?
This is Stefan speaking, and it's okay with us. We'll be happy to meet up there. If we can do it over a weekend, that would be great, but we'll be happy to take you up there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lund. So
if you have our email address, I suspect, because if not, we can get it to you through the staff.
Great. Thank you. So if any member of the commission wants to visit, I would suggest contacting staff. Harry?
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, I think if you coordinate it through staff, just so there isn't communication, I'm sorry, it's a legal thing between the applicant and the commission members apart from the commission meeting and the public hearing context. So it would be ex parte communication. Not that that's going to happen, but just to rule out any possibility of someone raising that. It's probably better to coordinate it through staff. And, at that point, just to remind commissioners, even if you're doing it individually, if you're running into neighbors, applicants, the best approach is to not engage in conversation other than, is this what's shown on the map over here? Directional questions and responses really are the limit of what the discussion should be taking place if you're out at a site visit, even individually.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate the process.
Any other comments from commission members or staff? Hearing none, then we're continuing this item number 2 to our June 6th meeting. And again, if you want to make a site walk, commission, contact Harry. That brings us then to item number 3, which is Lisa Vita Williams, applicant owner, 16 Well Sweep Road. This is a special exception for an accessory apartment. Is the applicant ready to proceed with that?
Harry, could you make Lisa Vita Williams a co-host, please?
Yes, I will. Is there anybody else?
Lisa, do you have an engineer or anyone with you today?
No, I do not.
Gotcha.
Hi, thank you. Again, my name is Lisa Vita Williams, and I am the applicant and owner of 16 Well Sweep Road, here tonight to ask for a special exemption for an accessory apartment within my home. The sole purpose, as is stated in my application, is to create a safe space for my mother to also be able to live comfortably in this home. And as you can see from the application and Evan's report that I received today, that it seems that we meet all the qualifications. There would be no need for any exterior differences in the home or additional parking or anything like that. So the home, as I understand it, and in working with our surveyors, Gottfried, Hoffman, and Hodge, it looks to me that we completed the application and do meet all the requirements. I thank you for your consideration, and I welcome any questions.
Chuck Anders here. Thank you, Ms. Williams. Maybe we'll ask Evan to review the staff report.
Sure. Like Ms. Williams said, they're legalizing an existing accessory apartment. They meet the requirements of the R4 district. They meet our parking requirements as well as the criteria for accessory apartments in section 7.4. Based on the application materials, they meet the special exception criteria as well. Staff recommends one finding, that the commission finds that the proposed use is consistent with the special exception criteria. We recommend 2 conditions. One, that any outdoor lighting has to be compliant with section 6.7, and that the owner of the accessory apartment or the property has to file a deed restriction that would require the unit, if it's rented, to be rented at rates that would be deemed affordable.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Thank you, Evan. Questions, comments from commission members before we open up to the public? Hearing none, then let's open up the public. Does any member of the public wish to comment? Evan, you see anyone?
Just to reiterate, the reaction button or raise hand button down at the bottom of your screen if you'd like to ask a comment or question. I do not see anyone.
Okay. Any further comments, Ms. Williams?
No, I don't, not at this time.
Okay. Any comments by commission members or staff? Hearing none, then we'll close this matter as a public hearing. This may be something we can be able to address after we complete our public hearings. So thank you, Ms. Williams.
Thank you so much.
That brings us then to items, the next three items, 4, 5, and 6 are all 4 3 Elms LLC. Applications at 4 3 Elms Road, a special exception modification coastal site plan for multifamily residential 4 units. Also special exception for oversized accessory structure, garage that's over 15 feet in height. And finally, a special exception modification for the grading under 6.8 of the regulations. Is the applicant ready to proceed with this application?
All right, could you make Megan Miles? I believe Russ Campaign is here tonight as well. Megan, is there any other members of the team?
Joe, I believe, maybe Joe Gaudio, who represents the owner.
Tony Bolduc is here as well.
Oh, good. Tony made it. Okay. He's juggling 2 hearings tonight. So is he on the line?
Yes.
Great. Oh, and then Sue Fields is, so I think she might just be the Sue, is our landscape designer. I'm going through the list here.
Susan S.
Is there
just Susan S.
There's Sue Fields, and her name's Sue Fields. I see a Sue.
I see.
She has her hand up.
She just changed to Sue. She's a co-host already.
Okay.
Sorry,
how am I doing here? I must be listening to somebody already.
I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, somebody else can just raise their hand if I'm missing anyone later.
All right, thank you, Harry. So for the record, my name is Megan Miles. I'm a land use attorney at Carmody, Torrance, Sandak, and Hennessy. My office is at 195 Church Street in New Haven. My firm represents the applicant, who is also the property owner. It is 4 3 Elms Road, LLC. And as I mentioned, here on behalf of the owner is Joe Gaudio. Our architect is Russ Campaign from CK Architects. Tony Bolduc from Stevens and Associates is our engineer. And then Susan Fields is our landscape designer for the site. The property is 4 3 Elms Road. It's in Stony Creek. And the application that's been filed is simply to modify a prior approval to increase the number of dwelling units from 2 units to 4 units, which had actually been approved for the site back in 2022, I believe. However, these modifications did trigger the requirement for 3 special exceptions: a special exception to increase the number of units to 4 in the R2 zone, a special exception modification for grading and fill, and then a special exception for the height of the accessory garage related to increasing the grading for the site. Let me just share my screen briefly, and then I'm actually gonna, oh, Harry, sorry, I need you to permit the screen share here.
Harry, I think you're muted.
All right, could you make Megan a co-host?
I just did. Sorry, I was saying that went into nothing.
I saw you walk away. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, great. So can you guys see my screen here? It's a PowerPoint.
Yep.
Great. So this is the site here. As I said, it's in the Stony Creek Village. Here's Thimble Island Road here, 3 Elms Road. It's zoned R2. It's in the Stony Creek Village District, and it's also within the CAM boundary. It's 0.6 acres, and it's bordered here by, this is called the Squaw Brook. It's a tidally influenced brook. Also, this is the post office for Stony Creek, and then single family and multifamily homes. And then it's easily walkable to Stony Creek Beach and the shops and restaurants here on Thimble Island Road. I'm going to skip here. The Google Aerial still has the old building that used to be on the site. So I think this is helpful for reference, but the site, my understanding, actually has a fairly lengthy zoning history. Some of you might be more familiar with it than me at this point, but I know they handed me an entire banker's box of zoning applications back when I asked to see the file. So it was a hotel constructed circa 1870. So it was a historic hotel, predated zoning. And then my understanding from the zoning file is that around 1979, there was a fire and it was rebuilt with 7 units, dwelling units, 11 bedrooms. So the non-conforming structure was reconstructed. Jump to 2015, the prior owner began a series of zoning applications and approvals related to site grading, parking areas. And then relevant to tonight is that in October 2021, the Planning and Zoning Commission approved converting the building to a 4-unit residential building. My client, the applicant, purchased this property in 2022, and in December of that year, they obtained a modified special exception approval to actually reduce the number of units, to reduce it down to 2 5-bedroom units, condo units. So they're going to be very large condo units, but only 2. And then they also received approval for 2 accessory garages on the site. Early marketing efforts, however, for this approved development indicated it really extremely low demand for 5-bedroom condo units. So actually, let me just, here's another angle. Again, I pulled this from Google because they're still here. And then this is what was approved back in 2022, I believe. So this is the main structure with a large deck area. And then these were the 2 garages. And so to orient yourself, this is 3 Elm Road here, this is the post office, and then this is the Squaw Brook here. So the project that we're here for tonight is we're going back to 4 units. The bedroom count is reduced from 10 bedrooms to 8. The plan is to maintain the accessory garages as garages, maintain the flood compliant building design, including venting. And I will now hand it off probably to Tony to start with the site plan, and I'll have Rush share screen. But I do want to briefly give some high level points on the unique features on this site. So mainly the historic nonconformities that are either being maintained or reduced in connection with these revisions. The existing foundation and footprint of the main building are to be maintained as approved. So no changes there. There's no proposed additions or increases in bulk within the front setback, which is particularly the legally non-conforming portion of the building. So no increases, additions there. And then the approved steps and landing have been significantly reduced. The western parking area, so you can actually see it pretty well here. There's historically been that sand parking area there. The proposal improves, so the proposal is to reduce the parking area, stripe it, and install 4 inches of stone. So the point is that this improves existing conditions in this area, which is within 25 feet of the coastal resource. That's why I bring this up. So there's historically been parking here. So within this area, they're reducing the impacts through the installation of the crushed stone to remove suspended solids, and reducing the size of the parking area, as well as a significant landscape buffer, which I will have shown on a different screen. 2 other things before I hand off to Russ and Tony. 2 corrections for my narrative that I wanted to bring up. I noted in the narrative that building height was slightly reduced from approved. It's actually unchanged. The building height is being maintained from what was approved in 2022. And then the reduction in building coverage, initially we had it listed as a reduction of 1,882 square feet. It's actually a reduction of 1,137 square feet. So I wanted to make sure that was clear for the record. It's on the zoning table, but I want to make sure that was clear. And then the overall floor area of the building is being reduced by 932 square feet. And last, and then I'll hand it off, we did request a waiver from the requirement for a landscape architect. I just want to make sure that we address that tonight. I'm happy to discuss it now. I'm happy to discuss it later in our presentation when we are reviewing the landscaping, but I note for the record that we did make that request, and happy to discuss it further with the commission and get your thoughts on that. I will attest that Sue is wonderful and very good at her job, but she's a landscape designer technically. All right, so with that, I'm going to stop my screen share. Russ, I believe, is now going to take over control of the screen share and showing the plans. And I was hoping Tony could start by reviewing the civil site plan. And if particular, Tony, if you could take them through comments that we received in our staff report, and then further revisions that have been made to the plan in response to those comments.
Yep. So we received the staff report from the town. Item 1 was just it's just a statement, so there's nothing to address there. So they did. Item 2 is a bulk requirements
for the application, and there was a typo in the 2020 in the column for 2022 under that approval. It actually copied the impervious coverage and put that in the lot coverage, so that is correct. So that was just a typo there for that application. So then there's a bunch of comments that will go back to the landscaping. So I'm going to skip over to 6.1. So there's a portion of the I was going to actually, Russ, can you flip to the second page? Does that show? Okay, so there, thank you. So there's actually the rear portion of the silt fence. That's existing silt fence. And so what we intend to do is to keep the majority of that. There's a little section that overlaps where we're going to need to do some grading. So I've highlighted that in red. So that was the comment 6.1. It said a portion of the existing silt fence crosses the proposed. So we're just removing that and we are going to, like I said, we're going to keep it so we have dual layers of silt fence. Item 6.2, we actually adjusted the grading along the side of the garage. There was concern about if that was graded to a 3-to-1 slope.
Mr. Bolduc, excuse me, can I 1 second? Is it possible to enlarge the view there to zoom in on what you're talking about? That would be, I think, helpful for everyone. Oh, much better. Thank you.
Okay. So, thankfully Russ is doing this. So I did note that this is now a 3-on-1 slope. I put labels on there so you can see there's 3 feet between the grading. I did do 2 cross sections, one towards the front of the driveway. So that's the, I've shown as A here. It shows the proposed driveway, and it does show the existing grade going through. There's a pile of fill there at the moment. So there's a big peak that's actually going to get removed. And that is the beginning of the swale. And it also is the beginning of the wall that we were. So we did have a comment from the town engineer. Sorry to jump around like this, but it fits in the cross section. So he wanted to make sure that we extended. We did have a proposed wall in there. He wanted to extend it all the way up to the corner of the driveway. So we were better protecting the neighbors in case, with all the rain we've been having lately, just in case the swale was ever, to overflow. It would hit the wall and still be directed down gradient. We don't expect that to happen. It's rained quite heavily lately, and we're still not seeing any kind of runoff. It is a sandy site. So anyway, so we have adjusted that grading. We provided cross sections at the front and back of the garage. That's actually 6.2. So item 6.7, there's an existing note on sheet 1 that indicates that driveways are to be used for stockpile areas. That's on the first sheet. It was probably a little hard to miss because it is crammed in the corner there, but the intent is to use that entire driveway area as a stockpile area. And as you can see, there is already stockpile stuff there. On to item 6.8. The proposed wall, as discussed with the town engineer, will prevent runoff from affecting the adjoining properties. That was one of the concerns. We did have a conversation with the town engineer. Item 7. Let's see. This kind of was the same thing concerning the 3-on-1 separation. I did want to note, Russ, if you could pan to the left of the screen, showing the west side. So I did want to address, it does say that there's a steep area that is to be redone as 3.1. The end of the existing septic system was installed, and it is quite high out of the ground. And the previous owner just left it as is. So it is steeper than 3-on-1. So we do intend to fix that area and grade that out. Again, it's not going to show in the Google area photos, but it is a steeper slope than is allowed. So we do intend to fix that. There was questions about the wall height. So we've added top and bottom of the wall just to save everybody the math. The portion of the wall that's closest to 3 elms is only a foot high. Somewhere towards the middle, it gets to be about 2 feet high. And towards the back of the end of it is about 3 feet high. And then it just ends up, the grading will meld into the ground there. So we now extended item 13. The note was to make sure that the sidewalk extended the property line. We do show that. And then there was also approval from East Shore Health for all these changes. And I think there was one other thing that I wanted to address. So we are going to have a paved parking area, but it's just for the handicapped accessible parking. And we did extend a sidewalk so you can navigate the entire property, which is also accessible for handicap. It's also handicap accessible, which is why some of the grading had changed in this area. And I think that pretty much covers all the engineering staff comments. Anybody have any questions? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Russ, I think is next up.
That's correct.
Okay, if there's no questions, I actually, I'm going to have Sue go next, and actually I will have her unmute and can go through, I think, the plan, and then I will go through the architecturals. So Sue, you're up.
And Sue, when you get started, can you actually give a little information on your background as well? She cannot unmute.
What is Sue? Okay, I think I've got her now. Okay, you should be a co-host, Sue, and we'll be able to.
There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Susan Fields. I have a degree in landscape architecture and have been practicing in the state of Connecticut for 28 years now. I actually started at Van Wilgens, and I wish Joe Viuso was here because I know him well. But I've been doing landscape design. I actually worked for Wilbur and King after that and was a part of Stony Creek's community for a very long time while working for him. This landscape plan, I chose to choose plant material that was native to Connecticut. And also, oh, sorry, my name is Susan Fields. I live at 126 Flanders Road, Niantic, Connecticut. So, like I said, I degreed landscape architect. And when presented with this plan, I knew that it was very sensitive. We're very close to the coastal waters here, and that the plant material should be native and non-invasive. So I went along all the guidelines of the regulations, in that the fact that we needed to have a 20-foot thick buffer of plant material, particularly along that northern border, along the stream. We also noted to replace the tree that has since gone with a native black gum. But basically made a very thick border of plant material between a smaller lawn area and the sloped area going back to the stream. So that way you have shrubs, a great diversity of plant material that will be giving different seasons of interest, different height, buffers. And I think some of the other areas that were important was over by the parking area was another area that had been addressed. They wanted a thicker planting over in the upper northwest corner by the parking area. That was something that the community had addressed. This is not a native plant, but it is something that is evergreen and can give some buffer there, and also along with the bike rack area. So along that northwest border, I think was important. Something else that had to be addressed was, I'm sorry, I'm just looking, along the eastern side property line. We tried to put as many plantings as we could along the eastern line, although it's very thin, but there are things that are evergreen and wood and also seasonal interest. So there's junipers there, viburnums, laurel, and some other trees that are native to the area to help beautify the space, for one, which could certainly use that and add interest for the neighborhood and be conducive for what is expected in this zone. Are there any other things I need to address? Along the front roadside, we did as much as we could in that area and definitely made it a full, robust planting. And the back criteria of the 25 feet along that back buffer is definitely maintained. I don't know if there are any other questions. I know that you are looking to have a licensed landscape architect do this. I will say, I have great experience with plant material. Like I've said, I've been doing this for 28 years. I understand what is important, what can grow in certain conditions, and what the applicant and the town is looking for.
Great. If there's no questions, I'll move on to the architecture. Are there any questions? Okay.
Yep. Russ, I got to jump back in for 30 seconds because I didn't realize I missed something. Well, two things. First, I didn't say my name, which was Tony Bulbuck from Stevens Associates. But one other concern was that they wanted to notation about which way drainage was coming off of the garages. And there's a highlighted note that the roof leaders will pitch to towards 4-3 Elms onto that driveway. So that's how that drainage is getting addressed. That was it.
All right, thank you.
Actually, excuse me, Sharon Hutton, you have one question about the landscaping. I appreciate the fact that so much landscaping is going to be added to that property, which is definitely will beautify it. And I appreciate the sensitivity to native plantings. So I have a question as to why so many 146 plantings of Leotrope is being used, which is not native.
The reason why I chose that plant is because of there's not that much planting space in the beds where that is going, and it's actually immediately around the building. So those aren't necessarily, I tried to use many of the more native plantings along the border of the perimeter of the building, perimeter of the property, excuse me, where I thought it was very important to not have anything invasive. And Liriope isn't an invasive plant. It's not going to be picked up and eaten by birds and distributed. So I know that it is a good ground cover that looks attractive probably 11 months out of the year. So it would add beauty to the property, and it is contained within those stone walls. And that's why I chose that plant material. I just know it's a hardy, healthy plant that can survive that tight situation. And it's a high count because they only grow about this big around.
Yeah, I know they're very small, but
yeah,
in some parts of the United States, they are considered invasive. So I just want to add that to the record.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on with the architectural, I'll stay with the site plan for lighting. So we had good feedback from the Architectural Review Board, and they asked for a couple small adjustments, which we addressed. So there's garage man door lights that are associated with the entries into the 4 garages for the units. They asked for those to be on motion sensors and a full cutoff fixture. I was able to specify the light that we had picked originally with the full cutoff LED in it, and we put those on motion sensors. And then they also asked that the general lighting that is in-wall sort of brick lights and some bollards be put on a scheduled timer so that it would go on and off, as to a schedule, likely around off at 11 at night and probably on maybe at 5 a.m. to dawn, just so that it's sort of on a more residential schedule. We have flexibility for that, given it's an IRC project. It's under the International Residential Code versus the IBC. So I think we've been very careful with our lighting. We've chosen fixtures that I think aesthetically are nice, but also meet the dark skies and the criteria that are outlined. And I think we had good feedback from Architectural Review on our selections. Architecturally, just generally, so that you're aware, the townhouse is set up as sort of a 4-square with the party walls going in a T form here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 units. 2 entry are coming off of the east side, off of the upper drive, and 2 entries are coming off of the western drive on this side. But we do have site circulation that gets accessed all the way around. The upper levels have 2 bedrooms each. There are slightly different configurations. And then there is access up a stair to a roof terrace that are cut into the roof. So they're sort of hidden, but they, for these 2 units, provide great views down to the water. And these 2 units actually do borrow views through the adjacent areas as well over, hopefully, to the water. We haven't fully tested it out, but that's the hope. From an aesthetic, we sort of picked up on the original, which was more kind of a simple, somewhat almost industrial style building that is similar to the barn that's across the street. Again, the Architectural Review Board felt that this was a really great direction to simplify things, keep things a little bit more restrained compared to the last, which was kind of a very high style residential building. So they were very happy with the material palette and such that we chose and the way that we had laid it out. And the 3D images sort of show how it will feel. They aren't sort of rendered
photo quality, but they do give you a sense of the color and the contrast and how the pieces will fit together. And again, I think we got a unanimous support from the architectural review, feeling that this was appropriate for the Stony Creek neighborhood and area. So I guess I too am just open for questions. I don't want to over elaborate on this unless there are specific questions that people want addressed.
Candace, Chair, I think probably we'll follow our same format. We'll have a staff review the staff report, and then we'll probably ask, turn it over for questions, comments by commission members. So,
good.
Ms. Miles, is your presentation complete at this time, or do you have additional?
Thank you, Chair. I'll say some concluding thoughts and then hand it off to staff. So, to stress that this is really some modest site modifications and improvements from prior approvals to permit a really thoughtfully designed 4-unit condo. Overall, I believe the proposal is consistent with the historic use of the property, really for multifamily housing. For over a century, the site has been dedicated to some sort of higher activity use, such as a hotel, or up to 7 units on the site. The building scale significantly predates zoning, but it's a unique part of the fabric of Stony Creek Village, and the Architectural Review Board seemed to agree and appreciate the design enhancements to the building. And it contemplates the level of density that was approved back in 2021 in a reconstructed building of high quality, flood resilient design. Minimum level of parking at locations removed from coastal resources or protected, or with buffers that protect the coastal resources. And last, I will note that I believe this project is consistent with the POCD. It is particularly at sections related to encouraging flood resilient building design, protection of coastal resources, and expanding housing opportunities and design choices. Condo units, especially 2-bedroom units here, really provide a preferred level of housing for people that don't want to own a home and maintain a home. Like, I just know personally, I have family members that are looking to downsize into condos. And so this is a really nice diversity of housing for this area of Branford. And that's it. I will conclude with that. Thank you.
Check in, just share. Thank you, Ms. Miles. Okay, let's turn it over to the staff report. Evan, you want to summarize that for us?
Sure. So the applicant hit upon most of the items in my staff report. They also gave us some revised plans today or yesterday. So a lot of these items have either been amended in that plan, or a lot of these comments reflect the previous revisions of the site plans. The use change here is from 2 units to 4 units. I believe they went over all the proposed site plan changes. They meet the requirements of the R2 district. They clarified for us that error in lot coverage that was in the zoning table. They have requested a waiver of the landscape architect requirement. I just wanted to bring attention to a 13-inch Norway maple tree that was marked to remain on a previous site plan was accidentally removed. It had been a condition of some previous approvals that tree be marked on the site plan as a replacement for that specific tree. So staff would just like the landscaping plan to have a note saying the location and type of tree that would be serving that purpose. They have also put a vegetated buffer north of the parking area in the majority of the yard, as they showed us. This had been a requirement of some previous approvals that this be expanded to a 25-foot length to be in compliance with section 5.1 of our regulations. Staff would like the applicant to demonstrate that the proposed plantings adjacent to the parking area and between the waterway and that parking area would satisfy the requirements of that section. I think it's 5.1D, where they specify the different types of plantings that should go into those vegetated buffers. They meet the off-street parking requirement. They gave us some lighting information. There had been some conditions from the Stony Creek Architectural Board concerning the lighting. Mr. Campaign had described those conditions for us. the grading plan and the site plan had shown the silt fencing crossing over one another. Mr. Bolduc had shown us that they would amend that on the site plan. He also had gone over the proposed grading next to the garages. I believe they changed it to meet the 3-to-1 slope, and also had given us a cross section for the proposed swale, as well as that new wall that they will be installing on that property line. Mr. Bolduc also confirmed that the entire parking area will serve as a stockpile area. I think I'm going to provide additional comments based on the plans that were given to us today. So I'd like to do that in between our next meeting, or this meeting and our next meeting. I also would like the applicant to confirm how tall that wall would be, as well as the width of that wall. That space where the swale is proposed to go is in between this new structure and the parking area that they're proposing to elevate slightly. So just want to make sure that we have enough space to do everything they wanted to do over there. They satisfy the criteria from the coastal site plan section, section 9.7. We also received comments back from DEEP yesterday. They didn't feel that there was any adverse impacts to the coastal resources. They appeared before the Stony Creek Architectural Board on May 1st. They were given a positive recommendation with some conditions that we already spoke about. And it looks like they had extended the sidewalk to cross the entire site. Staff recommends continuing the public hearing so I can do a review of the changes that they've already made, and just to clarify some of the questions I had in my report.
Checking his chair. Thank you, Evan. Questions, comments from commission members before we open it up to the public? Any questions, comments from anyone?
I have a comment.
Marcy.
Hi. Yeah, I quickly reviewed the plan and and I was impressed with Susan's credentials, and anyone that's worked at Van Wilgens for as long as she has understands plant materials in a very intimate way. I was happy to see that she did so many natives along the sensitive areas, and Liriope is always used as a very stable ground cover around here because of the rhizomes and its ability to maintain itself in tough conditions, which can become native, and it is native in the southeastern parts of the states, but not necessarily up here. And her use of it being contained in the planters, I don't see as any kind of issue with being an invasive plant, and kind of is consistent with what I often talk about as there are definitely places for mature exotic plantings that are sold in the nurseries, and that natives don't necessarily have to be 100% on the property, but should always be used in areas that are sensitive, like the tidal regions. And so, I totally support what she's presented tonight.
Checking his chair. Thank you, Marcy. Other questions and comments from commission members or staff?
I did have one more question. Tony, is the existing basement or crawl space area, whatever that is that proposed to remain, or is that going to be filled in?
Actually, I'm not sure. There was talk about filling that in. I'm going to double check with Russ because
I can answer that question. The intention is to build this as a slab on grade and fill that in. It's going to be easier to use the existing foundation and fill it in with a slab on grade construction. And that also, I think, is a better avenue for us to take with the FEMA. So there will not be flood venting. It'll be a slab on grade with no understory. And actually the intention, because all the grades around the building when finished are above AE 12, AE 11 plus 1, we probably will pursue a LOMAR after we complete the project to take the building out of the flood zone, because it will be above the grade necessary to do so. One other thing that I would like to point out that I had forgotten to mention is we're also asking for a criteria for the outbuildings to be 1.3 feet above the 15-foot height limit in this zone, which is allowed under the special permit to request. We aren't raising the height relative to grade. It was that the original presentation that was done with the previous group showed the buildings 1.3 foot lower than they could be and maintain the adequate cover over the septic system. So in order to have the minimum cover we needed, we actually had to push the buildings up, but the grades came with them. So the relative appearance of them in relation to grade is exactly the same as was approved. It was really just in relation to sea level that they're going up and causing us, because it's measured from original grade, that extra 1.3 foot of height from relative to sea level. I think that's, yeah, those are the 2 points I think I just wanted to add to the record.
Check in to share. Harry, did you have a question, comment?
Just a couple of comments. One being just, Marcy, I don't know if you want to identify yourself, since you got very specific as a licensed landscape architect in the state of Connecticut. So you're just for the record.
I think you just did that for me, Harry. Thank you.
Happy to be of service. And also just, Mr. Campaign, if you could just the acronym letter map, I guess I've seen letter map adjustment amendment. The intent would be to try to get FEMA to agree that the area around the building, under the building, is not within the special hazard flood area. Yes. Because making adjustments.
Yes, I'm sorry, it is a low MA because we've already done it. It won't be a letter of map revision with Phil. So a low MA, right, Chuck? That's what we're going to go after the fact. Yeah. That doesn't really impact our particular, it's just, I think it shows that the building will be out of risk when we're done with our proposed modifications.
Yeah, it's just a term I think commission just doesn't run to with every application, that's all. So
okay. Yeah, low MA, letter of map amendment, which is based on an existing condition, having the grade submitted to be then recognized and identified on the new mapping, not to be in the flood zone.
Thank you.
Chuck in to share other questions and comments or comments from commission members or staff before we open it up to the public.
Actually, I did have one just comment. I'm sorry to, if someone could put the plan back up and looking particular at the parking area and the portion of it that gets close to that tidal brook on the northwest side of the site. There seems to be, I mean, what's visually seeming to me like a fairly deep turnaround area. I don't know if that tire depth is required. I've seen them to be much shallower, and whether one of the site designers can explain the need for that depth. Because I think respond to Evan's comment about staying as far away from that tidal brook as possible.
So there's two ways you can address that. So one, there's, it is trying to be handicapped accessible. So if there's a van involved, you do want a little bit more area to back up. And I know it's not a huge amount, but we're actually moving the turnout, which is 2 feet farther away from the wall than the existing parking. I mean, it's not a huge amount, but we're doing what we can. But I would like to try and keep that for, handicapped accessible.
Can the first space be the van accessible space if you feel the need for that with the
right, but I mean for backing up. So you're backing up a van versus a normal car. It's just a little bit more. We could shorten it, but it'd be nice to keep it. It is a little easier to back into that spot and then drive out.
Yeah, if you could do a turning template program just to show what it's actually needed, that might be helpful, because I think the idea is to minimize that as much as realistically possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chuck, can you share any other questions or comments from commission members or staff? Hearing none, then let's open it up to the public. Do any member of the public wish to comment? Evan?
Just to reiterate, there's a raise hand button down at the bottom of your screen. You can also type into the chat that you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. It looks like we have Marjorie Shansky who'd like to speak.
Good evening. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Attorney Marjorie Shansky. I represent Barbara Chesler and Karen Dahl, who are the owners of 8 3 Elms Road, the property immediately adjacent to this subject. The aerial photographs that council shared with the commission early in her presentation were notable for the amount of vegetation that historically was on the site, including the tree to which Mr. Brining referred, which needs to be replaced of some scale, and preferably to afford shade to the adjacent property, which the former tree did. I think my clients can be more specific about its exact location, but this is a long-term requirement that's been in place, and so the directive for it to be identified specifically on the plans is appreciated. I apologize that my comments are going to be a little disjunct because I had notes, and now that I've listened to the presentation, they are annotated. And I want to think about Mr. Campaign's comments about the garage heights, because looking at section 9.8.f subsections 2, 4, and 8 of the regulations, I think there are issues that dictate against the desirability or even the eligibility of the garages to have that additional height because of the text of those subsections, and because the garages are part of a permittable development scheme, but are going to provide a barrier to the tidal marsh, which is an important feature in this neighborhood. And the additional height is going to impair view access, so that while the roof deck of this structure is going to afford great views for its inhabitants, the additional height of these garages, if they're, and I would suspect that if it were engineering driven, I like to think that there's always an engineering solution that could obviate the need for the additional height, and then maintain the vistas that are already available, which I think is part of the Coastal Management Act. I'm not trying to create view easements. I'm just trying to keep the water views and the marsh views and the tidal wetlands views from being privatized in a way that shuts them out from the people who have long since enjoyed them. The lighting is reassuring to know that the garage lighting will be motion detected. I think that it would be, and I'm interested, I haven't seen the deep checklist or deep letter. I don't know which they wrote. I will look at that tomorrow, but the idea of there being timed lighting still is going to afford modest lighting to the tidal wetland, which would be nice to avoid to the largest extent possible. The, sorry. The proposed plantings along the east side of the second garage are indicated to grow to a height of 4 or 5 feet. And from my client's perspective, as a visual barrier, and so as not to be confronted by just the wall of the garage, would prefer that there was a taller vegetation that could reach a taller height to provide them with a visual buffer from that visual barrier. I'm interested and happy to see the wall that Mr. Bolduc described, because there is a concern about grading and drainage, and hopefully, and upon closer examination, perhaps that is being addressed, including the swale. I think that may be the gist of my concern. It would be nice during the construction phase of this development to relocate the electrical pole, the Eversource pole that is inauspiciously placed. And perhaps, I don't know if it's possible to be entirely underground, but there's a transformer that is marring the streetscape that's been there for some time, I think placed or for the benefit of the prior owner. And then there is a question and a hope for a higher achievement of stewardship of the property in the near term. We've been through, you all have been through, the owner has been through, and prior owners have been through other iterations of development plans, but in the meantime, the property could use some appropriate stewardship to be a contributing member of the neighborhood. And I think that those are the concerns. I'm hoping that they can be addressed in a meaningful way, and that the height of the garages can be brought into conformity with the regulations because of the standards with which they do not seem to comply in section 9.8 F 2, 4, and 8. So thank you.
Checking to share. Thank you, Attorney Shansky. Are there other members of the public that wish to comment? Evan, do you see anyone? Oops, looks like I see a raised hand. Evan, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Barbara Chesler, you'd like to speak.
Yeah, I just asked her on mute. Should be able to do that, Ms. Chesler. Oh.
That work?
Yes.
There we are.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We just want to add to what Attorney Shansky presented, that as all of you know, or most of you know, because you've been on the commission a long time, this has been a very long process going back to 2016. Maybe we've even beaten it to death, but it's our home, and we've been here 25 years now, and it's very important to us. And no one wants to move on more than us. And this is now, hopefully, if the plans that have been presented are approved with some of the modifications, I think this will be the 4th time that plans have been approved. And, we hope this time something will actually happen, which raises the question of maintaining the property between now and the time that actual construction begins. People kind of in the neighborhood joke that, well, at least now we have a view of the water. Well, it's a view of the water, but we're still looking at what many people in the neighborhood would state as blight. There's tons of garbage that's collected in all the weeds. It has been very difficult for us to maintain our property. Every time we weed out our entire driveway area, patio area, lawn, just the weeds are just coming right back. It's kind of frugal. So I just want to remind the commission that Stony Creek is a community, and specifically the residents of 3 Elms Road are a very tightly knit part of this community. Of the 8 homes beyond the corner property that we're speaking of, all except one have residents who have lived here on the street between 6 and 39 years. And 4 of us have lived here over 22 years. Mr. Whittick and Mr. Gaudio, while, I think they have good intentions, are developers from Fairfield County. They're not part of this community and have no intent on living here. There are no other developments in this part of Stony Creek. I'm not one that believes that what they're proposing reflects the character of most of the properties in the creek. Obviously, as was shown, it's completely different than the original property, which had a backyard filled with grass, gardens, and trees when we moved in here in 1999. And so the new plans include the addition of 2-car garage, really eliminating any green space and additional trees in the back. So we just asked that a few things of, we have a few requests, and that is, we really hope that we can work with the landscaper on creating a buffer of deciduous and evergreen trees along the property line to cancel out headlights and parking. And right now they're showing 4-car garage and 4 cars parked behind those garages. So that means a lot of cars going in and out, depending on how many cars and how many people move into each condo unit. And And really important to us is that the town ensure that the runoff from the property does not affect our property or Squaw Brook and the inland wetlands. We've actually done a lot to maintain the wetlands and eradicate all the Phragmites over the last 20 years. When we moved in here, you wouldn't have known there was a creek even back there. It was just inundated with Phragmites. So I'd like the assurance that the new owner will follow the guidelines established by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and that we're not affected by any runoff. And most important, that beginning now and throughout the construction period, the property be maintained. So thank you for your consideration. And last, I just wanted to add, I forgot, the light pole that was added by David Diatri. We don't know why it was added, the utility pole, I should say. But if that could be removed or reduced or eliminated, that would be very much appreciated. So thanks very much.
Chuck Anders, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Chesler. Are there other members of the public that wish to comment?
Yes, I believe a gentleman named Dan Bullard is trying to raise his hand. Mr. Bullard, can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I figured that out. That was very happy. Ladies and gentlemen, hi, I'm Dan Bullard. I live in Stony Creek. I happen to be on the Stony Creek Association, and there are just 3 points I wanted to back up for what Barbara said. And that's that it would be great if the property could be maintained during construction, as it's a little bit of an eyesore. I'm not sure I understand why the garage has to have a variance in height. And I do think that the lighting that's going to happen because of the different cars coming and going and the lighting around the property is, I don't know, maybe I just say it's too bad. But anyway, those are my points. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bullard. Are there other members of the public that wish to comment? See anyone, Evan?
I do not see anyone.
Ms. Miles, do you have comments? I understand that the hearing will be continued. Gives staff a chance to review the recent changes, as well as possibly the applicant to respond to any of the public comments. So any further comments at this time?
Yeah, just two. Thank you, Chair. So again, for the record, my name is Megan Miles. First, I want to say that I appreciate that we've actually gotten very clear action items from the neighbors on what we're looking for. I know that there's been frequent communications between my clients and them. We also had very productive conversations at the Architectural Review Board. So I've written all of that down. I want to note that particularly related to concerns raised about runoff and drainage, I can stress that the town is on this. I think all of our comments and revisions, almost all of them have related to providing additional information on drainage and the plans for that area, particularly plans for drainage, particularly along our eastern property line with, which is Ms. Chesler's property line. So we're getting scrutinized on that. I can say that much. And the revisions submitted today had to do with that. So that is very important to the town as well. And I want to address the special exception request related to garage heights. I find it interesting that Branford actually permits a special exception related to garage heights. And it's clear that it's because the regulations recognize that there can be some nuances in how height needs to be calculated and it is calculated, and how site constraints can affect actually building height, particularly related to grading. And so that's exactly what's happened here, where visually it looks like an average height garage, but because of the additional grading required for the septic to cover the septic tank, and it's Russ can actually probably phrase this better than me, but my understanding is that it's to cover the septic tank, which is behind the garages, and set back certain ways related to the coastal resources and that sort of thing. And then it's also to actually facilitate a concrete driveway apron in front of the garages. So there's a lot of different important site considerations that have actually gone into the garage height. So the special exception recognizes that there's a lot of competing interests that go into that. So that's the backstory behind the garage heights. It's not to just create a really tall garage. It's actually because site constraints required fussing with the grading in that area. So with that, I will stop, recognizing that it seems clear that the commission wants to continue this.
Chuck and Chair, thank you, Ms. Miles. Okay, we are going to continue this matter as a public hearing, but are there any additional comments from commission members or staff before we do so?
Oh, go ahead, Harry.
I just have one quick comment. Ms. Miles, could you send us your slide deck so we can put that into the record? I don't know if you have.
Yes.
Have it. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me.
And Evan, did you have some additional comments?
Yeah, I did want to ask if the commission could have a short discussion on whether or not they would be willing to waive the landscape architect requirement tonight.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair, because if we say yes, then that's something they need to do rather than spring it on at our next meeting. So what are your thoughts? Marcy, I think I heard you say that you were comfortable with the or what do you think?
Yeah, so she's had all the training, the educational training that a landscape architect would have. She's worked under a landscape architect, can't forget his first name, for a number of years. So she, and her experience at the nursery, you know, her knowledge for residential type planting is, you know, is excellent. So you know, she's not coming in trying to do a streetscape or some kind of plaza scenario that might be closer to a civil engineering type discipline that, you know, would be maybe a higher level. She's all of her experiences requisite and consistent with this type of project. So I certainly have no issue, you know, approving her as an alternate to, you know, as an exception to the case.
Chuck Minister, thank you, Marcy. Other thoughts or comments from commission members? Fred, I think you're muted.
Okay. I was going to say, if Marcy thinks it's good, I agree with her.
Okay. Thanks, Fred. Other thoughts from anyone?
Joe Chadwick speaking. I mean, to the extent this does not involve, you know, life, health, safety, and welfare matters that are regulated by the state, you know, sufficient skill has been demonstrated, and I have no problem at all with, you know, the capacity of this person to perform this design.
Chuck Minister, thanks, Joe. Others? Sharon, did you have a comment?
I defer to Marcy's expertise as well.
Okay. Anyone else? Massimo, do you have anything?
No, it seems like she did a great job with the landscaping. I think it's really good. Thank you.
Okay. And I agree. I kind of defer to the landscape people on this board, and if they're good, I'm good. So so Evan, I think that is the response that the applicant, it appears like we would be willing to waive that requirement for a landscape architect, that the landscape designer and the experience demonstrated by the I guess Ms. Field, is that it? Is it's good for this particular application, I guess. So anything else from staff or commission members before we continue this matter? Okay, hearing none, then we will continue these items 4, 5, and 6, our agenda, to our next meeting, which again is on June 6th. Again, a Zoom meeting on June 6th, starting at 7 p.m. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
That brings into item number 7 on our agenda, which is Paula Murphy, applicant and owner, 35 East Main Street. This is a special exception for an accessory apartment. And I understand that the applicant is requesting that we open and continue this matter to our next meeting. Does that sound right, Evan and Harry?
That's correct.
Okay. So if you're here on this item, if you're here for the 35 East Main Street, Paula Murphy, that's a special exception. We're going to continue this matter to our next meeting, which means, guess what, guys? We're going to have a big agenda at our next meeting. So because we're continuing virtually everything. So item number 7, we're continuing that one to our next meeting on June 6th. So that completes our public hearing items. And so just moving down to our agendas, I think we have the minutes from May 2nd. And I understand, Harry, you wanted to look those over, staff wanted to look those over again and possibly tweak a few things. Is that correct?
Harry Smith, Town Planner. Yes, from a formatting perspective, and there's a lot of potentially excess material in here, which is text of the proposed regulation amendments that we discussed at the last meeting. So I'd request, sorry, that we table them to again the next meeting.
Okay. And then in terms of the public hearing items that we did here tonight, I believe there's one that we may be in a position to act on. That was item number 3, which is Lisa Vita Williams, 16 Well Sweep Road. That was the accessory apartment. There was, I believe there was no public comment. And Evan, perhaps you can pull up the staff resolution, your recommendations for that one.
And just if I might interject, just a reminder, I believe Sharon Hutner is up to vote. I think Massimo voted the last time there was a missing regular member.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so Sharon, you would be voting on this one. And I think it's the standard finding and the 2 standard conditions for accessory apartments, one about the lighting and one about the deed restriction. I think the applicant was good with that. There was a finding that it conformed with the regulations, and I think Evan actually reviewed the findings and conditions with us during the public hearing presentation. So if no one has any comments, if someone wants to make a motion to approve this application by adopting the findings and conditions in the staff report that Evan sent to us and is presently projected in front of us on the screen.
I'll make that motion. Fred Russo.
Fred makes a motion to approve the application by adopting the staff recommended findings and conditions. Is there a second?
Chadwick seconds.
Second by Joe Chadwick. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Joe Chadwick.
Joe Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo.
Fred Russo's in favor.
Marcy.
Marcy's in favor.
Sharon.
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
And the chair is also in favor. So that application is approved. That brings us now to old business. And it looks like we have 2 items on there at 3133 Flax Mill Road. They need to have public hearings scheduled. And I believe those will probably also be at our next June 6th meeting. Is that correct, Harry?
Harry Smith, Town Planner, that is correct.
Okay. So that brings us now to new business. And item number 1 is Parkside Village 1 LLC, Andrea Gomes applicant, Branford Housing Authority owner. This is a site plan modification for section 8-30G, Affordable Housing Land Use Appeal. And this is multifamily residential at 115 South Monowee Street. Is the applicant or Harry?
I do have a
comment?
quick comment just before we get going. And bring this to the commission's attention. This application was the subject of a public hearing. One was originally approved, even though a site plan per se does not require a public hearing, and the modification of the site plan does not require public hearing per statute. But I believe it's within the commission's purview to hold a public hearing if they choose. That would not affect the 65-day time frame to decide the application, which would start today. So I'll leave that to you, and probably should decide that, I would imagine, before any information is presented. So yeah, with all the discussion, if you do want a public hearing, is within the context of the public hearing.
Sure. Yeah, I guess part of it is, it's the phrasing is it's a modification of the of this, and I suppose whether we hold a public hearing, I suppose, depends on the nature of the modification, which would be hard to tell unless we know a little bit more about it. So in some ways, it might be helpful to hear
version of
here a description of what the proposal is. Frankly, if we do schedule a public hearing, we could recommend that anyone listen to this for any background. So, so anyway, is the applicant, you want to give us a description of what's proposed here, Ms. Gomes? Yeah, I think you're muted at the moment. So
let me see if I haven't made her a co-host. I will do that. Hang on one second. Great, should be all set in a second.
I believe it's working. Can everyone hear me?
yes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Mr. Smith. It's been a long time. Nice to see you all again. For the record, my name is Andrea Gomes. I'm an attorney at Hinckley Allen, which is located at 20 Church Street in Hartford. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, Parkside Village 1 LLC, an affiliate of Beacon Communities, which I know the commission is familiar with. Also on the call with me tonight, and Harry, if you wouldn't mind just also making them co-hosts, if you will, in case they need to speak, are Emily Bouton, the Senior Development Director at Beacon Communities, and Paul Santos, our consulting architect from Newman Architects LLC. Mr. Chairman, I'll be giving just an overview of the requested modification. Emily and Paul will be on should the commission have any questions about the modification. So as you said, Mr. Chairman, we're here tonight for what we have coined a temporary minor site plan modification. The thrust of the request really has to do with a note on the approved site plan, which was added in 2017. But I do think a bit of background is necessary before we really dive into that note for the commission to understand how it's impacting the applicant today. So as the commission knows, the development history of what used to be called Parkside Village 1 is long and complicated, so I'm not going to go into that. But suffice it to say that in November 2019, the commission approved the final resolution for this site, which was for the development of a 67-unit multifamily community under Connecticut General Statutes 830G, Connecticut's Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals Act. And that approval was subject to a number of conditions. At issue tonight is that site plan note that I mentioned, that as far as we know was added in or around 2017 at the request of town staff. We believe it was the then fire marshal and the building official, but we're not positive, which that note provided that while existing Parkside residents, so those who lived at Parkside and elected to remain as residents of the new building, which is now called Shoreline Grove, that while existing Parkside residents could be moved into the new building upon issuance of the temporary certificate of occupancy, new residents could not be moved into the building until a final CO was issued. Both the language of the condition, which if the commission has our tabbed package, it's in my tab 1 letter. You'll see kind of a block quote of what the condition says, but both the language of the condition and the recollection of our team indicates that the plan note was added due to concerns with potentially insufficient parking during the final stages of construction. So today, Beacon has its temporary certificate of occupancy, and I'm saying Beacon because Beacon's the developer, but again, the applicant is Parkside Village 1 LLC. So Beacon received its TCO in March, and in April, it relocated 30 former Parkside, now Shoreline residents into the new building. Taking up, so those 30 residents now occupy 30 of these 67 units. Because the final stages of construction include the completion of the Shoreline Grove parking lot, those 30 residents are now parking in the 23 parking spaces that are located immediately to the west of the property in Sliney Field. And if I may, Harry, will I be able to share my screen here?
You should be able to.
Okay, so can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is the site plan, and this is our parking phasing plan, which I'll get to in a moment, but just to give the commission a visual. So the 30 existing residents that are now in Shoreline Grove, this is still all under construction here. This will be the final parking lot for the building. So those residents are parking in these parking spaces, which are within Slimy Fields. There's 22 parking spaces right now. And the commission may recall, this is where Parkside Village residents used to park before the redevelopment of the site. Of those 30 residents, only 12 have cars. So we currently have 10 vacant spots that are not being used. And we know this not only because of our boots on the ground count of the vehicles by the applicant's team, but also because Beacon limits each unit to one car on site and requires that any resident or any unit wishing to have a car on site needs to pre-register that vehicle with management in advance. So with those limitations and of course staff on the ground, we know that there are only 12 cars there for the 30 residents on site. So while Beacon has filled 30 of its 67 units, I know the joke that lawyers aren't supposed to do math, but thankfully this is pretty simple. 37 of the units remain vacant, along with those 10 parking spaces in the Slimy Field parking area. And according to this plan note, they will remain vacant until a final CO is issued, which is looking like it'll be toward the end of August 2024. This is obviously a huge concern for Beacon as it keeps the over 150 people on a waiting list looking for this type of housing, waiting for several more months before they can get into these available energy efficient brand new units. So to rectify this, and the reason we're here tonight is to ask the commission to delete that site plan note that I mentioned and permit the applicant to move new residents into those 37 vacant units on a rolling basis until the parking areas are full. And we've phrased the request this way because as the commission can see from the existing parking on site, very many of these residents don't have cars. So we're asking the commission for the flexibility to move people in until the parking areas are full. Again, that one car per unit rule in each of the leases and the requirement that all vehicles be registered in order to park on site will ensure that Beacon is able to monitor the parking accurately on a day-to-day basis. We are also going to be issuing placards for all registered vehicles on site, making it that much easier to monitor those who are appropriately parking on site. If approved, and we've noted this in our letter, what we suggested is the applicant would provide staff, whether it be Mr. Smith or the ZEO, with weekly updates on the amount of people that have been moved into the building. And the amount of people, the amount of units, and the accompanying parking spaces being utilized. And we'd be happy to do that on a weekly basis or more frequent if necessary. And of course, the nature of this request is temporary because once the certificate of occupancy is issued, all of the residents of the new Shoreline Grove will just be parking in the central parking lot here, which the final parking lot will have 83 parking spaces plus an emergency vehicle parking space and a loading space. So more than enough parking for the building at that time. Now, as the commission may have gleaned from our application, I don't know if the commission's had an opportunity to look through this parking plan. The nature of construction is that it's ongoing and it's changing. So what we've tried to do for the commission is put together essentially a schedule of what parking spaces and how many parking spaces will be available and when as the final stages of construction are completed. This is the parking phasing plan, which I believe is at tab 5. And then there's an easier to read, frankly, parking table, if you will, in our tab 1 letter. I'll go through it quickly here. So residents will continue to park in these 22 parking spaces until about July 15th. I say about because, again, that's the anticipated schedule, but construction is construction. So we're saying at about July 15th, until about July 15th, they'll continue parking here. Around July 15th, the Slimy Field parking spaces will increase to 23 spaces. And the front half, this, I guess I'll call it a red shaded area of the final parking lot will be available. That means there'll be a total of 59 parking spaces on site. If needed, the applicant has this reserved parking area that it could temporarily gravel or mark off for additional parking. But again, we really don't think we'll come close to needing that. By August 9th, this back half, this blue area of the final parking area will be completed, thereabouts. And around that date, you'll now have about 106 parking spaces, or you will have 106 parking spaces if you're counting Slimy Field parking and the final parking lot, and you're not counting the reserved parking area. Then once residents are directed to start parking permanently in the Shoreline Grove parking area, as the commission likely remembers, the Slimy Field parking spaces will then be turned over to the town for public use as improved. So just a couple of the logistics for the commission's edification is residents will be alerted of these ongoing parking changes, you know, where to park and when, by posted notices, hand delivered notices, signage, and there will be a resident services coordinator on site Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 p.m., not only to answer questions or provide any assistance, but also to monitor to ensure that people are parking where they should be and that no one that those who have not registered a vehicle are not parking on site. We did note in our application that we'd be happy, especially during that time where we are only using the Slimy Field parking lot, we'd be happy to put up additional signage indicating that that parking is only for registered Shoreline Grove residents, and we'd be willing to dedicate one spot at all times, at least for visitor parking exclusively. So with that background, I'll just go into a little bit of the basis for our request. As the commission knows, this is an 830G application, which means the commission shouldn't deny unless there's a public health and safety issue, which outweighs the town's need for affordable housing and which cannot be addressed with reasonable changes to the plan. We are keeping emergency access open at all times throughout these final phases of construction and with this parking plan, and active construction areas will be appropriately fenced and noticed with signage to ensure the safety of residents and passersby. To provide the commission with further assurance that there's no public health or safety issue here, we actually reached out to the fire marshal and the building official. We sent them copies of our application and our parking plan specifically and asked them to review and tell us if they had any comments or problems. Both the fire marshal and the building official confirmed that this is not a life safety issue. It's more of a parking / zoning issue, and that we'd have to address this with the planning and zoning department. Fire Marshal Dobuzinski confirmed that with the TCO, the building can be occupied. Although as an 830G applicant, as the commission knows, the non-compliance with a zoning regulation is not a valid basis for denial. I do want to point out to the commission that there is precedent for the commission imposing kind of this case-by-case basis parking arrangement for applicants. The regulations at 6.5.d as in dog allows the commission to determine the number of spaces based on, in essence, evidence submitted by the applicant that it sees fit. Again, this is a temporary parking arrangement and a modification, not a permanent one, but just highlighting that for the commission. So lastly, Mr. Chairman, before I hand it back to you and the rest of the commission for questions, we are asking the commission to approve this application tonight. We do not believe this merits a public hearing. This plan has been vetted thoroughly and repeatedly and is subject to a host of conditions and is under very close review by the town at all times. The existing residents are already going to be adhering to this parking plan, if you will. So we're really just asking to be able to move in the new residents so that the building is not remaining mostly vacant for the next 3 to 4 months. truly the parking plan is really no different than if a fully occupied building had to temporarily redo its parking lot and had to find temporary parking accommodations for its residents. It's a relatively minor ask. It's temporary in nature, doesn't involve any health or safety concerns as confirmed by the fire marshal and the building official. And it's being proposed by an applicant affiliated with Beacon, a multifamily residential developer with over 20,000 units in its portfolio. And I mention that only because it shows the extraordinary amount of experience that Beacon has in dealing with these exact same issues throughout its portfolio. So one last comment, as I do want to note, the town's affordability plan, the 2022 to 27 affordability plan, recognizes the need for affordable housing in town and explicitly says that housing is a basic human right. Let's get these units opened and occupied as soon as possible to help fill that need. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Chuck Chair. Thank you, Ms. Gomes. Okay, so I think we've heard the applicant's presentation, and I guess the first issue is, do we want to have a public hearing? I suppose we could. And the applicant has indicated that she doesn't believe it merits a public hearing. So what I think we should talk about that first. In my mind, the reason why you'd want to have a public hearing is that the original one had a public hearing. So I suppose you could say, if there's a modification, you should have a public hearing as well. Even though the public hearing was because there was a text change and map change. But a more analogous situation in my mind, and just in terms of looking for precedent, is that special exceptions require public hearing, and our regulations allow that when there's a minor modification to a special exception, we can waive a public hearing. And this is more, in my mind, in that kind of category. I understand 830G separates us, but again, just looking at the procedural issue, I think this is more in that category for me, that we could, I guess public hearing isn't required, but we could, if you just analogize, this is like a minor change because there's actually no change to the footprint. There's no change to the number of units. There's no change. The changes are temporary. I guess it does relate to the parking and to the sequence of the parking, but to me, that's not, I'm okay not having a public hearing, but anyway, so just sequentially, that's what my thinking is on that. Let's go around and see what the rest of us think. Joe Chadwick. Joe, you're muted.
Sorry, my mouse was stuck again. To the extent that the commission did not make those requirements, it's a little odd that we're put in a position to relieve the requirements. But if we believe, or we have evidence from the fire marshal and the building official that they don't have a problem with it, then it becomes a moot point. There's there's nothing to have a public hearing about. This is really just a fairly pro forma procedural, approval. Again, being an 830G, what are we going to do? Say no? I don't see an issue as long as the authors of the restriction are okay with it.
Sure. Yeah. And Joe, I appreciate your going right to the heart of it. I'm trying to get rid of the procedural issue first, whether we should have a public hearing, and then go more to the merits of whether we should approve or not. So it sounds like you're okay of not having a public hearing.
Absolutely.
Okay. Fred.
I'm not in favor of a public hearing. We have a building that's completed. We have people living in it already. I think the way to expedite this project to be fully implemented is to allow them to finish it up. I think that was a big project. I would just say this. Initially, I was not in favor of it, but I think they've done a pretty good job from what I could see. And at this stage of the game, I'd say that whatever we could do as a commission to expedite their getting those units up and running and getting the old buildings down and getting the parking lots in, we should do that. We're not doing all the hard work has been done already, and all the discussion's been done. And I agree with Joe. This is really kind of a wrapping up the deal kind of a thing. So I would be in favor of not having a public hearing and allow the builder to finish up the job and get the building 100% operating.
Great. Checking sure. Thanks, Fred. Marcy? Marcy, you muted?
Hi, can you hear me now? I actually have an opposite opinion. I often hear cases where temporary COs are given to get people in, which I understand when it's a few people, but that's by not allowing the people to move in, it motivates the builder to finish all the picayune stuff in the building that needs to be done. That may not be the basis for preventing it, but my other concern was, we're in the prime season for use of the slimy fields, and if there's still, construction going on and that kind of traffic, I prefer to see less residents moving in because the construction's not finished. So to me, that's just kind of common sense. I'm not trying to be difficult. Clearly they know what they're doing. They've got people lined up. So I don't see the move in after the fact being an arduous thing. I just would like to see one thing finished before the other. The reason I would want to have a public hearing, not because I love staying up late every night to listen to these things, even if it isn't A3G, I think, the neighbors have strong feelings about the projects. I'd like to hear if their opinions have changed. I'd like to hear how they feel about, the traffic. I think there's going to be an adjustment with the traffic regardless when the construction's over. And, maybe this helps mitigate that because it eases it in. But I just don't like the, having more traffic there, having the busy season at Foot Park and Slimy Fields going on with construction still going on. And maybe, and I don't know what the items are, but, it looks like half of the parking lot is not, is still being reserved for construction practices. So, I mean, I really think from a standpoint of, the impact that that's going to have on the Slimy Field Road because of it, I just think it's too much. It's like if it's 2 months, it's 2 months. It's not the end of the world. It's not that much revenue. They've spent a ton of money as it is. They'll recoup it. They've got state funding. Finish the project. Get your COs done. Have it built to a safe manner. And so it's not a temporary CO. So that's kind of my take on it.
Okay, so you would be in favor of having a public hearing?
Well, I would, because I think the public has a right to speak.
Okay.
But I'm not sure because of the AG whether that gives them, that sways the outcome necessarily. But I think it's kind of common sense to, that the builder needs to finish, and one of the ways to leverage the builder to do that is to not give them their CO. And if you let everybody move in, there's no leverage to have the builder finish their items. And that's just what happens. That's why we hold bonds for things and different things. So
okay, no, that's fair.
Different.
It's a fair point. Massimo, thoughts on a public hearing or not?
Yeah, I'm definitely in favor for a public hearing. I'd love to hear what the existing residents that think that they have a parking spot. I mean, do they, if they have family members that come over, bring them groceries, even though they don't have cars, that means they must be having somebody drive for them or with them or picking them up or dropping them off, anything. And it just kind of, it just makes me wonder. It's like, when people rush to get more residents in when things aren't completed, would we be doing this for, a smaller development? Would we be doing this for, would we even have that option available for people? Why have it open for this project if we wouldn't, have it open for any other project. You know, I say, get the job done, do what you're supposed to do, you know, in a timely fashion. And when it's completed, that's when the other residents could move in. You know, it's just, you know, it sort of makes me wonder, you know, when people rush, and, you know, are you having any courtesy for the existing residents or your neighbors? So I'm definitely open for to hear about what the existing residents has to say about this and what the surrounding neighbors have to say about this. You know, I think in common courtesy, you know, we got to keep that in mind, you know, and that's my thought. Thank you.
Thanks, Massimo. Sharon?
My sense is that the original residents have been relocated into the newer units, that they should be complete and livable. And so I would think that that would be good enough for the newer residents coming in as well. And I think that people who need affordable housing are really in dire straits, and waiting even whatever length of time it takes is really a challenge for them. So I would vote to do away with the hearing.
Okay. Okay, so let me just, I'm trying to analyze the issue. So it sounds like if we had just a motion to whether or not to hold a public hearing, my sense is I would probably be opposed to it, but I don't know if anyone was convinced. So why don't someone, and actually, Massimo, you're not voting on this, so someone make a motion to have a public hearing, and let's see what happens.
Marcy will make that motion to have a public hearing.
Marcy makes a motion to have a public hearing, and for the sake of discussion, I'm going to second it. So motion's been made and seconded to have a public hearing on this. Joe Chadwick, how do you vote?
Joe Chadwick votes in the negative.
Okay. Fred, how do you vote?
No public hearing.
Sharon, Marcy, how do you vote?
I vote for a public hearing, even though the time it would take to have the public hearing would probably take the time for them to finish all the items.
Okay. And Sharon, how do you vote?
I vote against the public hearing.
And I also vote against the public hearing. Okay. So now we're not having a public hearing. Doesn't mean we have to decide it. Doesn't mean we have to decide tonight. I mean, we're not going to have a public hearing. So then we get to the merits, and it sounds like and we sort of discussed that. On the one hand, it seems to be a minor temporary change. There's no police or fire objection to it. On the other hand, I think Marcy raised some good, the sort of two reasons why we should deny the application, or, it would be because just like granting the application, it's a temporary event. So we're only talking about a few months anyway for them to complete it. So, so why not just do them? So the two reasons why you would, the reasons you do it, as I understood it, would be one, you've got you've got a bunch of places that could be filled, and I'll tell you what, and it looks like the applicant certainly wants to speak. I want to give her that right, but I'm going to give her a chance to talk, to address what I say when she speaks. So Andrea, we'll get to you. But as my general understanding is, why would we approve this? Because it is, first of all, we'd have to have a good reason not to approve it, because it's an 830G. There'd have to be a public safety issue that outweighs the need for affordable housing. That's for one. But another reason to do it is that there is, apparently the units are ready to be occupied. Some of them are, but there's a bunch of vacant ones. And I guess the third reason is there's a mechanism to ensure that it doesn't cause, it's not going to cause a parking problem. They have the right to use the spaces now under the existing approval, and it's simply ensuring that no more than they have the right to use now, that the new people that come in either don't have cars or they won't go over that, and there's some process for doing that and to address the issues. The reasons not to do it is, and there's sort of two reasons that sort of Marcy was alluding to, was number one, gee whiz, this had to happen during the opening of the softball season. At a time right when, this is happening right when we're starting up playing on the fields, and people frankly park in those spaces. They're eventually going to be turned over to the town. I suppose the response is, well, look at, they have the right to use it now during the construction, whether it's softball season or not. But, there's some issue. And then the issue is there some reason, if we give them the right to fully occupy the place, they lose incentives to complete the project in a timely manner. That's the whole reason to withhold COs. And Marcy threw out the issue, what about, well, could you get a bond or something? Is there some other guarantee to ensure that you would do that? And I suppose the third issue is there any, what if you don't have, what if you use all your spaces, where and you needed extra spaces, where could you park? I mean, would you park, you wouldn't park on the street. You would park in Foot Park, or I don't know. I mean, that's, that's sort of looking at the possibility of if you do allow people and say they have cars and there's not places to park, where would you park? Because they want to use them all up, and it's not like there's excess right around. I don't think. Maybe there is. So anyway, Ms. Gomes, what do you got to say?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Andrea Gomes, counsel for the applicant. Mr. Chairman, you took my first response right out of my mouth with regard to the concerns with traffic during softball season. We have the right to use all 22 spots, 23 as of July 15th. So the proposed modification would involve us moving as many people in as we can to fill those spots and nothing more. And we've also agreed to reserve one spot at all times within the Sliney Field area for visitor parking. So we have the right to use those spots. I don't think that there's a concern with that. And I'll actually skip down to your last con, if you will, Mr. Chairman. What if there's overflow parking? Well, as I explained during our presentation, Beacon requires, first of all, they limit in their lease that each unit is only entitled to one parking space. And residents are required to park on site. They are required to pre-register their vehicle with management. So the idea is that Beacon will know exactly how many cars are going to be on site at all times. And to the extent there are additional cars above and beyond those that have pre-registered and that have the placards that management will issue, they get towed, just like it would be at any multifamily development, any business where you have prohibited parkers on site. And that's how it would be monitored. Again, we have the resident services coordinator on site 9 to 5 every day, Monday through Friday, to monitor that. Regarding incentives, and I do have Emily Bouton on the line if the commission has questions on this, but the Beacon did sign completion guarantees, which means that they cannot convert to their permanent mortgage without completing and getting their CO. So there is extreme incentive for Beacon to move forward and finish this development as quickly as possible. And if the commission has any questions on that point, I'm sure Emily would be happy to jump in.
Let me just follow up on that. So the incentive, they can't convert to their permanent mortgage. Do they want to convert to their permanent mortgage? I have no idea. I mean, is it a lower rate? Maybe they're happy with whatever financing they have now. I don't know. Why is that an incentive? Just answer that question.
Yep. Can I ask, Emily, are you on?
I've made Emily a co-host as well as Mr. Santos, so she should be able to unmute herself.
Let me see. I wonder if she called in.
All right, let me do it. She's right there. So she's co-host.
Mr. Chairman, apologies. She's in a better position to address that answer.
Okay, you can move on with.
Actually, Harry, the phone that has the last 4 digits 09000. It's actually, I see it on screen right now. I think that's Emily's call in.
So it's a 617 area code?
Yes.
With zeros at the end? Okay, I'll ask her to unmute.
Hi, everyone. This is Emily Bouton from Beacon.
Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hear me now? Okay,
yes.
Great. So to to answer some of the questions about Beacon's incentive to finish this work, it's really not an option for us. We have to. Chairman, your question about whether we want to convert to permanent financing, we have to convert to permanent financing. The financing mechanism currently funding the majority of construction is a construction loan with a finite term that ends in 2025. And at some point, there's no option to extend it. So we have to convert to our long-term permanent mortgage that we have with a private lender. And the only way to do that is to demonstrate that we've completed everything that we said we were going to complete. So we also have a tax credit investor who's a part of the ownership of this development, and we signed guarantees with them to promise and pledge that we're going to complete everything we said we were going to, and if not, there are severe penalties to do so. So we absolutely will be completing everything that we said we would do, including all of the site work that's still outstanding.
Does the town have any bonds left on this? I don't know. I don't know if we got any filters.
No, I don't think so.
No. Okay. I'm just thinking, what's the Cherry Hill Road one? The guys just moved in and with no CO, and I don't.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not analogizing that, but that's the whole reason. Or would you be willing to submit a bond? I mean, I don't know. Probably don't want to do that. Probably cost too much, but I don't know. I know you're not seeking a permanent CO, but you're seeking essentially the right to fully occupy the premises. That's what it sounded like. You said you had 37. I don't know. Would you be able to fill all 37 units remaining? Is that what you said? Yeah, or do you know?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I may, Andre
Yes.
Gomes, counsel applicant. Again, Emily can weigh in on this. There's over 150 people on the waiting list looking for this type of housing. My understanding is that Beacon will not have any issue filling these 37 vacant units. For the reasons that Emily just explained, we really don't think a bond is necessary here. If Emily wants to chime in, she certainly can. But as Emily explained, Beacon is looking at severe penalties if it does not complete this building and the site improvements by that 2025 date. So if that's not incentive, I don't know what is. And just to explain that the TCO, in many situations, you can, as the fire marshal confirmed, you can occupy a building fully under a TCO. I believe it was Commissioner Chadwick who said this is essentially a procedural issue due to this one plan note that came about in 2017. So it's not unusual to fully occupy a building under a TCO.
Gary?
I have a couple of questions now. We're not going to public hearing, if you will indulge me. This is a very atypical scenario in my experience, and I've been, doing this, it's 38 years now, and maybe you could enlighten me of any other examples you have of any Beacon's properties or any other 830G projects you know of where they proposed a certain level of on-site parking and a building was allowed to be fully occupied before the completion of the on-site parking that was proposed as part of that development. I've just not seen a scenario, anywhere that I know of, and I've worked in 4 states, several communities in 38 years. I've never come across this kind of request before.
Emily, do you have?
This is Emily again with Beacon. That's a great question, Harry. I totally agree. It's very atypical. I think I can't think of one off the top of my head, at least in my personal experience, where we've had sequencing just like this, but Beacon and me personally have certainly done many deals where we've had to carefully monitor parking, whether there's not enough spaces for every unit or parking lots are being done over while a building's fully occupied and they're completely unavailable during the course of renovations. That's certainly more common, where we have to repave or restripe and things are just completely out of commission. Those things we do all the time. And we make accommodations and we work with each unique situation as we need to.
Sure. And I have another question, which is, you mentioned 2025 as, if I understand that right, the kick-in period for penalties, but is there any penalty that will result if you don't hit the deadlines or the dates that was cited in the letter about, I think it's August something for completion of the on-site parking lot is the target. So is that just a target, or is something happen negatively to Beacon if they don't meet that date?
The effect is really on the lease up schedule. It's not necessarily when, like, the date of the parking is officially done, but it's really when we can start occupying fully the building and generating revenue and demonstrate that we have the financial stability to convert from our construction financing to our permanent financing. That's the real test that our lenders look at. And obviously being complete and able to lease up the building is a huge part of that. But there's no like drop dead date if the parking lot is done September 2nd instead of August 30th. That's so usually the lenders will
it could float, and construction being what construction can be, that date could keep slipping is what I'm getting out of that without any repercussions.
It could.
Occurring.
Everything that we slip costs Beacon money. So we really want to get it done as soon as we possibly can. It's very expensive for Beacon to have empty apartments.
I appreciate that, but we do have, I'll just share my screen for a second here and put up, and I know this is 830G, and I know when I cite sections of zoning regulations, that's needs to be done in the context of 830G, but I will point out that the default standard, and I was searching through the regulations to see, because I've never, frankly, had this request here in 9 years, that somebody wants to occupy a residential building without on-site parking that's proposed in the approved development application being completed. If you look here, this is a part of the parking regulations 65E. And down here you have section 65E2D, which says completion of the off-street motor vehicle parking facilities and off-street loading spaces required by this section shall be a condition precedent to the issuance of a CO. Am I understanding that the reason why the people actually in the building are ready was that this was agreed to as part of the original approval? Essentially, what I recall was to limit the inconvenience to the existing residents, which otherwise would need to be relocated off-site and then be waiting to get into the new building, recognizing that there was an approval and there was a lot of discussion about whether the construction could be phased in a way that allowed parts of the building complex, prior building complex, to continue to be occupied during construction. And it just turned out the logistics of the site, there was a way to work that out so that there were people going to stay on site. And then once the new building was completed, there's going to be parking in the back for them. And then there would be the ability to move them into the new building, demo the remaining 2 buildings, and then complete the parking lot and then fully occupy the project. That being the proposal by the applicant. So it's also, I think, in the context of, the default is absolutely, in my experience, the parking is completed and then, the building gets occupied. So I thought that. One more question though.
Well, Mr. Chairman, if I can just reply to what Mr. Smith just said before he.
Sure. Yeah. I don't know, Harry, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just have a couple of comments. Maybe you want to reply to all of them. And I think there was, Marcy Paluzzi raised the question of impact on the use of the rec fields and potential conflict with, the usage of the parking for those. And, you may want to submit or solicit some comments from the recreation department about, the potential scenario for that from, the department director themselves. And just the final comment I've got is, I appreciate the offer to get detailed information about what's going on out there should the commission decide to approve this. But, the staffing here levels really don't lend themselves to really any particular oversight of this, and I don't even know how we would execute that. So those are my off-the-cuff thoughts. This is day 1 of the 65-day review period also. So I have not done a full review of the project or provided the commission with a staff report yet.
Ms. Gomes?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding the zoning regulation that's up on the screen, putting aside the fact that this is 830G, the regulation says that parking needs to be completed for a CO. We're not asking the commission for a CO, nor could the commission issue one. That's not within their purview. We're asking the commission to allow us to amend that site plan note so we can fully occupy the building under a TCO, which we are allowed to do. The thing that makes this unusual is the parking situation, which is why we're telling the commission we're going to phase in or occupy the building on a rolling basis to ensure that we have enough parking for those residents. Again, I think it's also worth noting that of the 37 units that are vacant right now, and I have the numbers right before me, the 37 units that are vacant right now, 7 of them are market units, 16 of them are affordable units, and 14 of them are supportive units, which usually means people coming out of homelessness or other similar situations. In Beacon's experience, the cars that you're seeing for these units, there are not many cars parked on site, which is why you can see now today there's 30 units occupied and only 12 cars on site. So we truly do not believe parking is going to be an issue here. Regarding Mr. Smith's comment on concerns with the impact on the fields, again, even if the commission denies here, we're still entitled to occupy all 22 of those spaces. So whether or not it's with the 30 residents, which again, only 12 cars, but whether it's the 30 residents or all 67 units, those 22 spaces we're allowed to use. So there will be no additional impact on the fields by virtue of the commission approving this requested modification. And then lastly, Mr. Smith's concerned about the weekly updates. I can certainly understand concerns with limited staffing. This will be as simple as a weekly email from the applicant to staff. And I believe Mr. Smith asked about how they would monitor that. I mean, it would be monitored, I'd presume, by the zoning enforcement official, as it would in any town, to ensure compliance with the approval. And if Beacon failed to comply, the ZEO and the commission would retain its zoning enforcement discretion. So I think there's a lot of different protections here to ensure that nothing happens. And again, just let's see the forest for the trees. This is a temporary request. We're talking, three or so months. Commissioner Paluzzi said, well, let's get it done. It can't cost them that much money. 37 units over 3 or 4 months, that's a significant amount of money. That's not a penny in the bucket, so to speak. So I'll just end it there unless the commission has any other questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gomes. Well, I guess is there any, I'm trying to think if we can go, I don't know if there's any additional information that we would want to get if we didn't vote tonight. And I understand she wants us to vote tonight, but if we wanted to ask Alex Paluzzi or something, about that. I understand their point is, look, we have the right to use these spaces, whether or not, and by the way, the construction's going on, whether we, that's, it is, you're right. Construction is going to go on whether or not we approve this application. It's hopefully going to go on at the same pace, whether or not we approve the application. And so that's going to happen one way or the other, but in any event, so I don't know if there's reasons to, should we vote? Is there a reason for, additional information or what? So,
Chuck, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Marcy, go ahead.
When was the scheduled completion date, and are we ahead or behind of that? And my recollection, correct me if I'm wrong, was that those spaces over Salani were, mainly overflow spaces, not, yes, they have the right, but they were also intended to be goodwill for Salani Field to park in as well. And obviously, if they're going to move people in, they have a need to use them and they have a right to use them, and that right won't go away. But, I understand there's some friction already about ownership over those spaces. And maybe I remembered incorrectly, but my understanding was that the field always had used those spaces and they had swapped the land back because it, but there's a cooperation going on where we gave them approval because they needed to use part of that area for emergency fire, which I was against, the town, that overlap of sharing property. But now the the same attitude isn't coming the other way around. Have you ever driven by the parks right now? They're packed. The parks are completely filled. Alex has to park on the lawns on weekends, and to put more pressure on the parks for 2 or 3 months because the parking lot's not finished. I mean, it's I realize it costs. I didn't mean to be flippant about how much the rental costs, but what was the end date, and are you on target for it? Or are you just trying to recoup money sooner than you had originally planned because you were efficient, which the construction was.
So I'll jump in here if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Certainly, yeah, absolutely.
Andrea Gomes, counsel for the applicant. So I'll ask Emily to weigh in, or Paul, as it may be, to weigh in on the schedule as it has changed. But regarding the, I'll call it the goodwill question, if you will, Commissioner Paluzzi, and you're really asking me to rack my memory here, going back a number of years, there was a lot line revision because during the application process, when Beacon was doing its due diligence, we realized that a portion of Beacon's property was being used, was I think part of the baseball field itself. And then a portion of the town's property was being used, and I say Beacon, I mean the housing authority, was being used by the housing authority. So throughout this entire process, there was a lot line revision, which is the property lines you see today. And you mentioned a number of issues. So again, racking my brain a little bit. The emergency vehicle access, that was a whole separate issue. The emergency vehicle pullover is on our property line. I think the concern that the commission had going back to 2018 at this point, I'm not sure, was the concern that emergency vehicles had to cross onto town land to then access the emergency vehicle pullover. Again, the court eventually held that that was not a concern here. So I think what you're really getting at, Commissioner Paluzzi, is what are these Sliney Field spaces, these 22, soon to be 23 spaces? Who do they belong to? Who are they used by, et cetera, et cetera. Historically speaking, Parkside Village 1 residents parked there. And I think historically speaking, there was a lot of shared parking there. I remember the first time I went out to the site, that's where I parked because that's just where I saw residents parking. Today, the residents, and this is part of our final approval, part of our construction phasing plan and our resident relocation plan and all the various plans that were part of this very, very big approval, the existing residents or the residents of now Shoreline Grove are allowed to utilize those 22 spaces, 23 once the staging gives us one space back. Once we no longer need those spaces, or once the final parking lot is completed, those spaces will be then turned over to the town, improved, and Emily can confirm this. I believe they've been newly paved, so the town gets the benefit of getting these nice new spaces, which will now fully be dedicated to public use. So I know that's a lot of background, but that's how I recall it. So you're correct, Commissioner Paluzzi, that this has been shared, but the agreement or the approval that we have is that we can use those spaces for residents during this construction process. But once we're out of there, they get turned over to the town improved. So I'll ask Emily if she has anything else to add to that, and then also to weigh in on the construction schedule.
Hi, this is Emily Bouton with Beacon. I don't have anything more to add to what you said, Andrea. That's great. From a construction schedule perspective, we aren't trying to cut down construction schedule by doing this at all. We're actually a little bit behind the original projected date based on some ledge issues that we ran into related to doing the building's foundation. That's all behind us now, but no, this is not an attempt to shorten or speed up the original construction schedule.
Okay.
When were you targeting to finish it though? Like how far behind are you at this point? That's Marcy Paluzzi speaking again.
We were originally targeting spring of 2024, and now we're looking at late summer of 2024.
Right, which leads to my point about the coordination of spaces. I appreciate that they're going back to public use, but the timing of when you need them and want to maximize them is creating undue pressure. And in my in my field, because I've always felt that that road was, you know, safe and not safe and needed to be kind of eliminated. And it wasn't, because, you know, even though the fire access has been moved, you know, it was left as sort of an option for fire access in case of an emergency. And, you know, that's just, you know, I just think I mean, I appreciate that you need to recoup the costs as a result of the delays, but I also feel that, you know, it's very poor timing with the events that go down on the field. If this were the fall, I'd have no issue with the spaces because there's not the demand on the park at that point in time, you know. And it's just unfortunately a perfect storm, and you know, I'm not sure what the balanced and reasonable answer is, and I'm sure, you know, the commission will weigh on it, and you know, I'll probably be outvoted, but so I'm just speaking my piece.
All right, checking in to share. So thanks, Marcy. I don't know if there's additional information or if we should vote. That's sort of the question. We've heard the request. I mean, we're not having a public hearings, but we can, you know, if we need to get something from the recreation, I think we know that, you know, it is used. I mean, this is the prime, you know, Little League season, and it's, you know, for the next couple of months, probably. It's just unfortunate that it's happening. That said, I think she's absolutely right. They do have the right to use the spaces. They're not using more than they don't have the right to. You know, and the question is what they are proposing. Are they going to do excess? In other words, they had, I forget the numbers of how many spaces there were. There were 30s. How many spaces? I don't know, 30. Yeah.
It gets confusing. So as of right now, there are 22 parking spaces in Slimy Field. 12 of them are occupied. So we have 10. We've agreed to have one as holdover visitor parking, if you will. So basically there's 9 vacant spaces that we're going to fill in. By July 15th, the Slimy Field area will increase to 23 spaces, and we'll have that front portion or that and beginning portion of the Shoreline Grove parking area ready. That's an additional 36 spaces, plus a space for loading and a space for emergency vehicles. So we're looking at, by July 15th, we're having a total of 59 parking spaces on site by July 15th.
Okay. And what how many spaces do you need how many units are left that you want to rent? 37.
So there's 37 units left. Again, each unit is limited to 1 car per unit. In Beacon's experience, that is significantly above what is actually usually registered with management. But you know, taking that, the fact that there's 37 units to fill, let's say there was 1 car per unit, which again is way above what Beacon anticipates. By July 15th, we'd have more than enough parking to accommodate 1 car per unit at that time. But that's not what's going to happen. We think we're asking the commission for a little bit of flexibility of being able to move people in on a rolling basis as long as there's sufficient parking.
Okay, so right now you would have.
I have a question. I'm sorry. Is there a way to move the people in that don't need those spaces over at Slimy Field until which time the spaces on site are ready?
No, we can't prioritize people who don't have cars. That's barking up a Fair Housing Act issue. So
how long until the lot on site is ready?
Until the final.
Yeah, excuse me. Can we go back to the graphic just so we have that up?
One moment.
I think I have a copy of it here. I can put it up. You got it?
No, I've got it.
So can you walk us through, because I'm looking at this and you said the front parking area you're targeting for, is that July 15th in the pink?
Yep. Mr. Chairman, can I just start from the top, if you will?
Yeah.
So currently right now we have 22 parking spaces in the Slimy Field parking area. And we are occupying 12 of those. So there are 10 vacant spaces. By July 15th, we'll get 1 additional space. And can everyone see my mouse?
Yes.
Okay. we'll get one additional space here. I believe there's one parking space you can see right here that's basically being used for staging, I think it's staging. So by July 15th, we'll get one additional space here. So that'll give us 23 spaces in the Slimy Field area. And the 36 spaces that are here in red will be available. So again, these are approximate dates based on our construction schedule. So we will have the 23 plus the 36. That gives us 59 parking spaces on site by July 15th on or abouts. That doesn't include, there's actually 2 additional parking spaces on site for emergency vehicles and loading and unloading. But we're ignoring those for these purposes to be more conservative. So by July 15th, we've got parking here and we've got parking here, 59 spaces. By August 9th, thereabouts, this back portion of the final parking lot will be completed. So you'll have the entire parking lot available, which will have 83 spots. And there will be a little bit of an overlap, obviously moving tenants who are parking on on the Slimy Field parking spaces, ensuring that everything's coordinated with them moving here. So by about August 9th, we'll actually have 106 parking spaces if you're counting Slimy Field plus the final parking lot. Once all of the residents have been formally basically relocated to the final parking lot here, and once these parking spaces have been cleaned up enough to be turned over to the town, because there's an obligation that they're improved to be turned over to the town, then we'll basically be what we will be in the long run, which is parking on site, and these will be public spots. And we're anticipating that'll be mid-August or so.
Yeah, I mean, just throwing out a possibility. I see that, you know, the pink red area in front, and I can't remember how many you said that were going to be there. I can't really read it from
36.
36. So, and that's July 15th. Wouldn't that be, to me, to sort of go in the middle here, you could set a scenario where when that parking lot's, those 36 spaces are available and complete, then you could move additional tenants in. Because then you would have the 59 until the back parking lot's complete.
I mean, that's something certainly that is possible, of course. We'd prefer to be able to.
Listening to different commissioners have different viewpoints and.
Understood. But let me put it differently. The concerns with the use, and I've said that we've had, and I don't mean this tongue in cheek, that we have the authority and the right to use these spaces until we get our CO and we hand them over to the town. If the existing 30 residents, right, we only have 12 cars registered. So if the residents today who have no cars all decide that they want to have cars and they decide to register, we'll be fully occupied here. So I understand the concerns with fully occupying this during a busy sports season. But again, that I feel like that's a non-issue. I'm sorry, I interrupted someone.
Sorry to interrupt, which is, you know, the tenants in the existing units that have been moved from the units that are about to be demolished in the 2 buildings that were left, that they're still up, I believe. They are moving from studios, and I believe they're all single individuals, as opposed to what the target tenant, I believe, was for the new units eventually, which are families that are moving into 1 and 2 bedroom units. And you can explain, you know, the numbers involved, but so potentially, even though you have the group of 30 and you only have 12 cars, did you say?
Yes.
I mean, with new tenants coming from folks that were never in Parkside that would meet the criteria you had established for the eventual full use of the building, which is use by families, you could easily have scenario where you had at least each of those additional 37 had at least 1 car. I would think it'd be probably unusual if they did not have a car. They're a demographic, aren't they?
So again, there's a lot there to unpack. So let me start by saying the 30 existing Parkside former Parkside residents that are now in the new Shoreline building, they've been relocated there. Those 30 are in 23 1-bedrooms and 7 2-bedrooms. So they're not all single bedroom occupants. And the entire building is
came from studio units in the old buildings, correct? I mean, you're
I
talking about
believe
people
so.
are paying $300 or $400 a month in those studio apartments, is my understanding, essentially.
I can't speak to what the rents were at Parkside Village 1 originally, so I don't know. I don't think that's relevant here. But yes, they went from Parkside Village 1, the studios, and now they've moved into, and Emily can chime in if I'm missing something here, but they're occupying currently 23 1-beds and 7 2-beds. Emily, is that correct?
It was at Parkside, the original buildings for Parkside is a mix of studios and ones. And now
Thank you.
new building mix ones and twos.
Thank you, Emily. And again, Harry, you were saying the 37 vacant units could have at least 37 cars. They would never have more than 37 cars because there's a 1 car per unit rule in all of Beacon's leases. So that there would never be more than 37 cars for those 37 units. But again, 2 points on that. Of those 37 units, we have 14 supportive housing units. These are often people coming out of homelessness. 16 affordable units and 7 market rate units. We truly do not think there will be 1 car per unit. And I think that's borne out by the ratio you see today, 30 units with only 12 cars. But the entire reason we have phrased this requested modification the way we have is to permit Beacon to move people in until there's no more parking. I think we said this during the public hearing ad nauseum. Beacon does not want to overpark their site because then they're having to deal with towing. Town staff is coming to enforce the approval against them. They're getting cease and desist. There's problems on site. Beacon doesn't want problems. No developer wants problems, especially here. So they would just be moving people in. And again, they would do so on a rolling basis. As people come in, they get approved, they sign the lease, they register a vehicle. Beacon knows, okay, 1 space has been occupied by unit 1, 2, 3, whatever it may be. And then they would go forth accordingly, providing weekly updates to the town. That's why it's hard to put an exact number on this because it's a holistic process, I'll call it, for lack of a better phrase.
Well, I mean, I just see the potential scenario of, I don't think it's necessarily apples and apples with the tenants in the existing complex versus people coming in new in terms of who's going to have cars. And I appreciate the supportive housing aspect of it, but I think you'd have to plan for probably a little higher ratio of folks having cars. And it sounds like you got to exceed the capacity of the 22 space area, 23 space area pretty quickly. And then, I mean,
but then we wouldn't,
we just won't have if a problem develops, I don't think we're going to have the tools to cope with that at staff level. I just can't say that's going to be able to happen.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just had to go. It sounds like you got 9 spaces because 1 is going to be for visitor. So you have 9 spaces. How many? And you got 37. And I'm assuming this is less of a problem whenever you build the pink stuff, when you get that done, which you say is going to be July 15th. But, but so you have 9 spaces. How many of the 37 units do you think you could lease out if you just have those available? Because I'm assuming you're not going to, I don't think you could lease out all 37, but do you think you could with those?
No, I don't think it would be all 37. It's certainly, obviously there'd be a minimum of 9 units that could be leased with those 9 spaces. I think that Beacon did an analysis early on, and they were again, very conservative. I think they were thinking maybe half a car per unit, if you will. We were trying to think of how to apply for requested modification. We were originally throwing around parking ratios, and it got too confusing because it's hard to predict. It could be, it's at least 9 units. It's probably going to be more than that. I'd hate to put a number on it because I don't know who's on the waiting list and in what order. I don't know who has a car and who doesn't. So it would be at least 9 units. If not more, if those people come in and don't have cars. And then ultimately that number would grow as more parking becomes available in this, again, this red or this pink area on or about July 15th.
Is Marcy Paluzzi again? None of the spaces in the sliding lot are handicap accessible. Isn't that an issue with fair housing, especially given the use here? I mean, I imagine you could you might have more than 9 residents because some of those 9 might not have cars, and then you could move, say half of them don't have cars, so you could likely have 12 or 13 residents move in with those 9 spaces, depending on who has cars and who doesn't. But none of those spaces are handicap accessible, and it seems like it's a 2-month wait to get the portion of that red lot done. To me, once that red lot's done, I don't have any issue, because there's not that, there, it's just so few spaces. It just seems to me like just get the red portion of the lot done, and then, be granted the approval.
Mr. Chairman, I'll have Paul Santos answer Commissioner Paluzzi's question.
Sure.
Yeah, hi. This is Paul Santos from Newman Architects representing the applicant. Currently, there's actually 2 parking spaces that are striped for accessibility. So of those 22 parking spaces that exist on the park side of the property, 2 of those are designated as handicap accessible. One of them, I believe, is currently being used.
The drawing just wasn't showing that, so that's good to know. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Paluzzi, if we added more stuff to this plan, I think everyone's eyes would have gone cross-eyed. So
yeah.
What is it that we would be asked? You're asking us to vote on? Is it because I know, and it's unusual. One of it is it's just a new item on the agenda. We typically staff reviews to get a report, and it's you're asking us to act faster than we normally do on this. Motions, we typically have a motion that staff has reviewed, and this is first time on the agenda. So I'm not quite sure what motion will we be approving, because there is a number of other things that, you said as conditions to ensure that you would provide, weekly monitoring and make certain assurances. Right. And frankly, I haven't seen those, because it's a new item on the agenda.
So, Mr. Chairman, again, for the record, Andrea Gomes, counsel for the applicant. The request in the application package, and I do apologize if we submitted it a week ago, hoping that the commission would receive copies to review in advance. So the request in the application is to delete that, I'll call it the offending site plan note, which I have here highlighted in yellow. To delete that note, the motion would be to delete that note from the approved plans, and to allow Beacon to move residents into the 37 vacant units on a rolling basis until parking is full. So if that is, and again, this is not the motion, this is just hypothetically speaking, if the commission approved that motion, certainly anything we've included in our application, including the suggested notice provisions, the 1 visitor space and everything, as you know, Mr. Chairman, that becomes part of the approval, because we've proposed it in our application and the commission has approved the application, and that becomes part of the approval and thus enforceable. So the request is to delete that note and to allow Beacon to move residents in on a rolling basis until parking is full, in accordance with the parking plan submitted with the application. That's generally what it is, and I don't think it needs to be more complicated than that, because everything else is laid out in the application itself.
Okay. Yeah, I unfortunately we haven't. I don't have the application from me. Okay. Well, let's let's go around. I think that our options are we can make a motion to approve, we can make a motion to deny, or we could table this and ask staff to draft a motion, but in which case they need a direction and act on the next meeting, or delay and we have 65 days to decide. So we'll do one more rounds of thoughts and see where we're at. Joe Chadwick, thoughts?
Excuse me, I'm trying to understand what it is we're protecting in the sanctity of parking for 2 months. This does not seem like such a tremendous deal in my mind to just dispatch with. And, you know, as long as the fire marshal's okay with it and the building official's okay with it as authors of that statement, I'm not sure what we're protecting by prolonging this discussion.
Okay, thanks, Joe. So you'd probably be in favor of acting on that?
I'm in favor of just acting on it.
Okay, great. Fred?
I think they have the right, number one, to use all the space they have. And they can still roll in people during the season, the baseball season. They have a perfect right to do that. So we're not talking about forever. We're not talking about every unit's going to be occupied in the next week. It's going to be a rolling schedule. And I think that in the end, when it's all said and done, yes, there's going to be a little bit of confusion. There's going to be a little bit of inconvenience for everybody, not only the people that use the field. It's going to be some inconvenience for the construction as well, because you're going to have kids there when trucks come in and out. They have to be more careful. I think for safety reasons, we should vote to have this thing completed as soon as possible. We're not voting on the building, we're voting on a parking lot. And it's a safety issue, not only to the residents of Parkside, but it's a safety issue to the people who are going to be using the fields, because there's going to be trucks and equipment accessing those roads in and out. And I'd say the sooner that we can reduce that kind of traffic, and it's on Monowese as well, if you can reduce that amount of traffic, then you will raise the safety issues for everybody, people in the new units, as well as people who are going to be using the fields. But just to delay it for another 2 or 3 or 4 months, it just doesn't seem to make sense. I agree with Joe. I think we're kind of overthinking this. If this was a permanent thing, or this had something to do with completing the building is done. Well, now they're just, I mean, the logistics are you can't. You had to move. You have the building first completed to move people out of the other building. Now you got to rip the other buildings down and do the site work. There's going to be overlap like that. It's okay. That's what happens during construction. I spent 40 years in it, and it's just not predictable every minute of the day. The attorney said by July 15th. It probably won't be July 15th because things happen. Weather happens. Bad things happen. There's certain delays, whatever. But you know what? I think if we as a commission, it's our intention, we approve this, okay? Let's get it finished. We're only talking about a parking lot. And if there's some people that are going to be inconvenienced, it's not going to be just one segment of this whole project. It's going to be everybody who's going to use that property, including construction people. And my concern is more for the amount of traffic, the delay in the amount of traffic that's going to occur behind those apartments, bringing trucks in and equipment in when kids are trying to get access to the field. I think the sooner we get this project completed, the better it is. So I would be in favor of no public hearing and voting on to allow them to go forward with their plan.
Okay. Thanks, Fred.
Can I speak?
Oh, yeah, Marcy, you're next.
Fred, you're contradicting yourself. You just said you want to maintain the safety by keeping the number of parking and kids down, but yet, you're saying to get the parking lot that you're in favor of the project. That there's no middle ground with that. To me, the middle ground is, we've already allowing the existing residents to get in, which takes care of the local need that was displaced during construction. That's already accounted for. The issue is bringing in new residents and increasing, I understand there's a huge need and there's a revenue aspect, but, there's a huge impact on the safety at Sliney Field along that road for both the residents, the town, with the overlap. So to me, get the red parking lot completed and then open it up to all residents. So I'm in favor of a scaled approach, but I certainly don't want to see residents other than what were approved under the original approval being assigned to those spaces in Sliney Field. I'm more than comfortable with the temporary CO still being in place and then parking in the red area. So that's my take on it, which I think is, and Harry's also said that, he doesn't have the staff to really oversee that either. So, to me, that's a nice happy medium. It gives everybody a little bit of a win, and it doesn't, prevent the rolling admission from happening once it's only 2 months away. By the time we were to finish, if we were to wait and review it for 60 days, it would be July anyway. So, I think that's a fair middle ground in my opinion, but
just to reiterate what I said, my concern is the safety of everyone. The construction, as Chuck said, is going to go on. The spaces are there to be used. Okay, so none of that's going to change. My concern is that the longer there's a general delay, however it comes, it's not going to be good for anybody. I think that if there is an inconvenience, and it's going to be a very short time, it's going to be years, it's going to be a couple of months, 2 months, 3 months, whatever. The project is completed, and once that front lot gets open, then they have access there, and those other lots, those other spaces that are going to be deemed for the town will be made available to the town. So I'm not, Marcia, I was on your side. You know that when this whole thing went down, but I think over the years I've come to feel that the need for affordable housing is there. Okay, they have a building up, they have empty units, and we're not putting people in them. And we're going to argue over a parking lot for a couple of months. I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I think on a more practical level, what's to be gained by the delay? That's what I don't understand. I think
the safety of people that are trying to park at Sliney Field, new residents that aren't familiar with the area, it just keeps the general volume down, and less volume of new residents coming and going in that building before that red parking lot is complete is, to me, a safer alternative. It's not. I understand that they have the right to use that, and it's cars coming and going on that road. If you can't grant housing to specify the parking until you know who's coming in. That's why they have to do it on a rolling admission, because they can't say we're only giving off the wait list to people who don't have cars, right? And that's why they can't, they've stated this, so that's why they can't specifically, say how fast or how many units would be rented. To me, the division is the overlap with the road going into Sliney Field and the traffic that's increased now as it is, because when that red lot is built and the rolling admissions happen, that most likely they can rent most of the building and would park in the red lot, and then if there's overflow, they would go into the Sliney area, not starting at the Sliney Field area, even though it's their right to use those spaces. I mean, it's just, maybe it's a perspective thing, but
Marcia, let me ask you this: Would you be comfortable with saying that because they have the right to rent use those parking spaces, they should rent up until they fill the spaces? Once the spaces are filled, then they've used your legal right to occupy all the spaces that are available. That might be 20 units, it might be 10 units, it might be 12. I don't know what the unit number would be. They would know. As they roll, what I'm saying is they roll tenants in, and some have a space, some don't need a space. That would determine the number of people would come in. It would be a blanket of 37. It would be just the number. But
they're bringing in the residents that used to live at Parkside.
They did that already.
They're already there.
They're there.
Maybe, okay.
They're already there. So
so half of those 23 spaces are used by the Parkside residents, and they
right.
Okay.
Right. So 34 residents came in from Parkside. They occupy 12 spaces. I don't know if you want to use it as.
It is kind of minutia because it's 9 spaces until July, but I want to feel comfortable that the red parking lot is really going to be up and running in July.
Right. And for what it's worth, the issue I have is, if we approve this application, do we give them disincentive not to complete the parking lot? And that's sort of what you're saying is because they'll be able to use these spaces and rent out, so they will slow down. Whereas if we take our time or deny it, then they got a lot incentive to do those red spaces and get them done.
I don't think, this temporary CO could have many things on it that don't even relate to the spaces. It could be, fire alarms. It could be, things like that haven't been, I don't know what the list is on the building. that has, has everything in the building been completely vetted by building department and we're just talking about site issues, or are there?
I think all we're talking about is this parking right now. That they got their temporary CO for everything else. The only issue before us is whether we approve this motion to delete this note subject to the conditions in the letter. And I was saying that the reasons that I understand your point. Your point, Marcy, is why don't we just, say once they get the red thing open, they can do it, basically. And that, because then there's less of a parking issue, and there's a possible safety because it's an issue because it's in the prime, softball season and so forth. And I get all that. The way I'm looking at it is if we approve the application, that would they, would say, okay, we can use all the front stuff, and therefore, I don't have incentive to complete the work that's done, and therefore, it's going to be longer and stretch out, and we're not going to. Whereas if we don't, then they do have clear incentive to get it done because of the rental stuff. And the way I come down is that sort of for three reasons. I think that even if they use the 9 spaces, they only got 9 spaces there, they ain't gonna rent out 37 units with 9 spaces. They still have incentive to get the red portion done because they are not going to be able to fill those things until that's done, and that's the July 15th done. So I'm okay. I'm frankly okay. They still have incentive, even if we approve the application, to get it done by July 15th. And there's a greater incentive to get the project done for their CO. I get that. But the temporary one push to get the immediate revenues in, I think even if we get them, let some of them, they ain't going to fill them up. They're still going to have an incentive because there's only 9 spaces. So they're going to have a bunch of vacant units. And once they get the red done, they're going to fill out the more. So they still have an incentive to do it. So I'm comfortable enough with that. The other issue is that I'm conscious this is an 830G application, and this is is there the fact that they do have the right to use those spaces, and the fact that there may be some new people there, they can use it now. I don't think it's going to be that particularly dangerous, so I'm okay with it, and that's sort of where I'm coming around. But I don't know where Sharon, we didn't get your comments.
Yeah, I still feel that the need for affordable housing is really dire. And if we can get people in there who need housing space, that really is more important than worrying about baseball families and where they're going to park. So I really feel that we should move forward and get this done.
Okay. Ms. Gomes, do you have any, or Ms. Shanto, Harry, what do you got?
I just have a question about, practically speaking, assuming the commission goes ahead and deletes the note, are you expecting us to somehow monitor the amount of parking that's available before we're issuing a TCO for the remainder of the units from the zoning perspective? Or are we just, at that point, they can fully occupy the building regardless of the amount of parking available, and how they do that's entirely up to them? Whether they self-police basically and say, look, we're going to go through our list, then we're going to fill up the 9 spaces in Sliney Field, those yellow, pink, whatever spaces, and then we're going to stop, or they continue to lease out the building and people park wherever they park. I don't see us being in a position to, I'm not sure I totally understand the proposal, to say, okay, well, you've used up your 9, therefore you need to stop leasing the units. I don't see how, we could even say that. And I think it's all incumbent on Beacon to self-police all the representations that have been made in the application and the discussion tonight.
I agree. I agree that they. I haven't seen all the representations in the letter. Frankly, I haven't seen the letter,
Go over that before you vote. It's up to you.
Yeah, but yeah, my understanding is they're going to make certain certifications to the office. It's just like when you have to certify certain things for 830G applications. They have to, they have to file certain, they make certain representations, and they have to, I don't know if it's in the letter or not, but I would require them to certify that before they lease out that, what the parking is going to be. And whatever, if they make weekly reports, they make weekly reports.
So that puts us back in the position of somehow issuing zoning approvals for the occupancy of the units based on the reports we're getting from Beacon, and either monitoring it even as finely grained as unit by unit. So they have to demonstrate to us that there is a parking space or not, depending on whether the tenant has a car or not, before there's some kind of zoning authorization for the leasing of a space or a group of, a unit, additional unit, or a group of additional units in the building beyond the 30 they've already got approval to occupy.
What I maybe we should review the letter. Ms. Gomes, why don't you summarize what you're proposing to how you intend to ensure that the spaces, that the 9 spaces that you have, that the occupants, the new tenants you're going to get are not going to exceed those 9 spaces.
So, Mr. Chairman, what we intend to do, and I'm a little bit confused by Mr. Smith. It seemed like Mr. Smith was indicating that we'd seek approval first from zoning on a weekly basis to move people in. That's not what we're proposing. What we're proposing is the commission is giving us approval now to delete the plan note and allow us to move people in on a rolling basis until parking is full. So, hypothetically speaking, we get this approval. We know we have 9 spaces as of right now. As of today, we have 9 spaces to fill. Let's say that the next, and again, I'm not involved in Beacon's leasing of the applicants, right? There's an entire process that applicants have to go through to show that they're qualified, et cetera, et cetera. But let's say the first 15 people on the waiting list who qualify, there's only 9 cars for those 15 people. We would move those 15 people in. There would be 9 cars on site. We would be out of parking. We would not be able to move anyone in, and we would be submitting weekly reports to staff. Again, it could be Mr. Smith, it can be the ZEO, it can be the fireman, whoever the commission wants. We would propose to Mr. Smith and the ZEO, just because that makes the most sense, a certification that as of this date, we moved in, again, following my hypothetical, we moved in 15 residents into 15 units. Of those 15 residents, there are 9 registered vehicles. Period, end of story. And then we cannot move more people in until there's parking available for additional tenants that come in.
Let's stop right there for 1 second. So, I mean, nothing stopping other than all of the representations made. I mean, we don't, and you said the zoning enforcement, well, practically speaking, there really isn't on this. So, I mean, that's fine as long as the commission understands this is all about self-policing on the part of Beacon, and that you're basically saying, it's up to Beacon at their discretion to lease out the remaining units based on their decisions about availability of parking. And there's reports.
And they certify it to us. They have to certify it, and if they're lying,
well, then what do we do? I mean, not that they're going to do that, but I'm just like, I'm it's long enough to have people all of a sudden things go differently than you think they're going to go.
Harry, I see that as a common problem. I mean, that there is a certain amount of certification of applicant, like this whole affordability stuff. I mean, it's based on applicants certifying that the people have an income level of X. Well, we don't send the zoning enforcement out to ask for the tax returns. I mean, there's.
I just want I think people are thinking somehow all we're going to be doing is getting the information. That's fine as long as everyone understands that, and the situation is under the control of Beacon.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, they have to honestly certify, and if you get complaints, you investigate it like any other zoning violation.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Am I able to comment?
Sure, absolutely.
Chuck, am I able to comment?
No, I'm sorry, Massimo. I'm sorry. You're not voting. You're not sitting tonight for this, and it's not a public hearing. So unfortunately, I hate to do that, but that's sort of where it is.
It's okay.
Ms. Gomes, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I feel like at this point I'm beating a dead horse, but again, this is like any other application. The applicant says they're going to do something, the commission issues an approval, and the applicant has the legal right to a presumption that they're going to comply with the approval. If they don't, the town can exercise its zoning discretion, whether it's parking, landscaping, density, building color, whatever it may be. It's like any other approval. And saying that in this instance, Beacon is not going to comply, that's speculative and frankly insulting at this point with how much Beacon has gotten to be able to do this. Now,
but
wait, I'm not saying that you're not going to.
I understand we don't want to put burden on our staff, and I get that we're making Harry going out and park, check cars. And that's a legitimate concern. I fully understand that, and that's why I want to put Beacon on the line to make these certifications so that they're in violation of their if they do violate it, which could happen, that they're in violation of certifications and that they're, violate oaths and so forth. So,
And Mr. Chairman, we're willing to certify in
Right,
our weekly updates, if you will, that we have moved an X amount of people. They're taking up this many parking spaces. I will say, because we're talking about Slimy Field parking, if there is someone that is not permitted by Beacon to be parking in those spaces, or if there's, impermissible parking, I'll call it, some of which is beyond our control, we will exercise our right as the developer and the owner of the improvements on site to tow those people, as we would in any apartment development, any multifamily community, any community whatsoever, if there's issues with parking. So to the extent we can certify we've moved in X amount of people, there are X amount of vehicles, we absolutely will, and that's our intent.
Okay.
Chuck, Fred Russo, can I say one word?
Fred, yeah, Fred. Yeah.
I just want to say that, one of the elements we probably not considered about policing all this is probably the people that have permits to park there. If I'm in Parkside and I have a ticket on my window that says I'm allowed to park there, and there's a car there without it, those tenants are going to give that management of Beacon a hard time. Why are there cars here? And I think it's what the management will do is exactly what she said, what the attorney said. They'll have those cars towed. I think the policing is not going to be done by the town. It's going to be done by the 22 people that are going to be parking there. They're not going to want their parking spaces used by anybody else but those who belong there and will have a parking space. And I think that's something that, it's not official, it's not legal, but I think that's where the pressure will come. It will be the peer pressure of the tenants who have a right to have those spaces. And when their spaces are being occupied by someone without a ticket, they are going to raise holy hell with the management, and the management will then know whether they made a mistake or not. But I trust, and I think the attorney made a good point. I trust that. Listen, they got a lot online. They got millions and millions of dollars at stake, and they're not going to finish a parking lot. So what would be the reason for that? They would want to get it done as quickly as possible. So I think that the monitoring of the parking lot we're talking about it'll be self-policed by the people who use it.
Okay. Here's my summary. It sounds like a majority are in favor of approving the application. The question in my mind is, do we approve it tonight, or do we wait till the next meeting and allow staff to prepare a resolution? Because frankly, I haven't seen the details of what the representations are. I know that it's a motion to approve the request to delete the note subject to the conditions in the letter, which have been orally represented, but frankly haven't reviewed. So that to me is sort of the option, assuming a majority are in favor of doing that. What do people think? And I know, Marcy, you're opposed. So I mean, yeah, and that's fair. But
I'm not completely opposed. I just worry about the traffic on the Slimy Road.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I mean, I understand that Harry needs time to do what he needs to do.
Right.
Sharon Hutner here. I mean, I think if there is more information that the commission needs in order to make an informed decision, then we should definitely get that information and postpone it till the next meeting.
Okay, I mean, that's what, then get a staff resolution, which is what we would normally do when something shows up. Harry, did you have a question?
I don't know what I'd offer as a staff resolution at this point. I mean, the application is, we have all the material and you have the recording of this meeting and, I don't know what, because it's either going to play out the way it's been proposed or it's not.
No, the reason would be
right up, I suppose. And I'm not sure what additional information there really would be. I mean, other than you anecdotally probably have the information you get from the Recreation Department, I would imagine, through Marcy.
No, they've represented they're going to make certain certifications or representations. So do we put that, we would normally say that as a condition, or maybe that's included in the proposal?
I think it's included in the proposal, so I think
then maybe we don't need to then.
I could offer, in terms of findings and conditions in this one. Because
if I may, I've represented that I know the condition of the parking down at the park. I've seen it. I know the history of it. If the rest of the commission feels that, that's not a safety issue, then, I'm not sure what the rec department's going to offer beyond that. I know that they would want to be good citizens to the Parkside the shoreline. I'm not sure the new name, the new residents there, just as much as they would want. And, I think there are going to be some logistical issues of confusion, but there historically have always been those there where Parkside had spaces in the Spliney area. Yep. Townspeople knew they were not allowed to park or their cars would be towed. So that's not going to be new to residents of the town. I just know how congested it gets there, how I go down to, Foot Park all the time. I see how full the parking lot already is, and we're not even in the full spring of the full season yet. So that's my concern, that, and in deference to Harry and his need to, wordsmith and review. But other than that, I don't substantially, disagree with Parkside's right to park there and use those spaces and roll in tenants, as long as the building is safe and, there's enough of a temporary CO to ensure that.
Okay. Well, then do you want to move? Someone make a motion to approve the modification, which involves deleting the note and subject to the certifications and representations in the letter by Beacon.
Chadwick makes that motion.
Motion made by Joe, second by Fred. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Joe Chadwick.
Chadwick is in favor.
Fred Russo.
In favor.
Marcy. Marcy's in favor. Sharon.
Sharon Hutner is in favor.
And Chair's also in favor. Okay, so application's approved. Thank you. Ms. Gomes.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Okay, so other business under new business, we have 23 North Main Street LLC, which is special exception. We got to schedule that for a public hearing.
Harrison Town Planner, I recommend that as the commission standing motion provides for that chair do that in conjunction with staff.
Okay.
Do it as soon as we can. And then the third item, number 3 under new business, we are looking at a public hearing on the 20th of June to meet our deadline of July 1st. Hopefully the commission can take action on it and we'll get clean reports from the referral agencies for the public hearing on the 20th. Right. And that's just complying with the statutory requirement to modify the regs.
Right. Okay. That sounds great. Other business planners report?
Given the lateness of the hour, I have really nothing else to add at this point. I will note we had a meeting of the landscaping committee, or initial meeting on the 6th of May, and we'll have another one, I believe, the first week of June, and happy to give you a report after that. And I'm sure Sharon Huttner or Marcy Cluzy would probably be willing to augment whatever I would say. So we'll just defer that. If everyone's okay with that.
Sounds good. Anyone else got anything? If not, then does someone make a motion to adjourn?
Fred Russo makes that motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn made by Fred. Is there a second?
Marcy will second.
Second by Marcy. Any further discussion? All those in favor, Joe Chadwick?
Chadwick in favor.
Fred Russo?
Fred Russo in favor.
Marcy?
Marcy's in favor.
Sharon?
Sharon Huttner is in favor.
And Chair's also in favor.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, good night.
Bye.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.